Section 16 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 8th month, August, Part 2. At last, summer sun over a summer sea, with the tide all but at the full, and the south wind stripping the foam from the wave crests and carrying it in shuddering iridescent clots far up the steep shelving beach. This is the hour when the terns begin their daily hunt along the water's edge. You can see them half a mile away down the pebbly shore, looking like a cloud of snowflakes whirling in the sunshine, and hear their shrill high voices borne over to you in a medley of faint broken sound through the rhythmic surge of wind and sea. But as they draw nearer, you make out that they are not really moving in close company. The little white gulls are spread out in fairly open order over a long stretch of the shore, flying some 8 or 10 feet above water level, and each narrowly scrutinising the surface beneath him as he slowly fares along. This daily flight of the terns, just as the tide is reaching its full, makes one of the prettiest sights to be met with on a seashore ramble at this time of the year. Seabirds, as a rule, though they have forceful dexterity of movement, exhibit little grace or comeliness of gait. But the tern is as skilful and dainty on the wing as any swallow. And he adds to it all something that perhaps no other seabird has the world over, a pleasant reiteration of notes that might almost be called a song. Here again, the tern reminds one curiously of the swallow. His voice has a like volubleness and continuity. It is the same chattering refrain upon the sun-steeped summer air, only it lacks the swallow's comfortable sweetness, and this of necessity. For a seabird's voice must ever be harsh and shrill to contend with the clamour of the sea. Every now and then the watcher may see one bring up stock still in the sunshine, all save a backward quivering motion of the wings. Now he looks, but in snow-white miniature, exactly like a hovering kestrel hawk, his forked tail bent under him, his beak pointing straight down. So still he keeps for the moment that you can mark the cruel, crafty eyes under the jet-black poll, eyes that can pierce the water deeps, as the kestrels the tangle of meadow grass and sedge. And then up go his wings, their sharp points meeting over his back, and down he drops like a falling stone, vanishing after his sighted quarry into the trough of foam-marbled swaying green. One of the strangest sights to be met with at this time by holiday wanderers along our wilder and less frequented sea coasts, such as those of Devon and Cornwall, is a group of cormorants engaged in drying, or rather draining, their wings. Ranged in open order along some narrow rocky ledge of the cliff overhanging the water, the big, sombre, rakish-looking birds stand on tiptoe, lean long necks and heads craned aloft, and great veins outstretched to the uttermost, quivering and dripping in the sunshine. They look like a company of fantastically clad water mountebanks, lifting arms together before making a simultaneous plunge into the sea. There is no particular reason why the cormorants and their smaller replicas, the shags, should take all this trouble to free their wings from the salt water after every dive, seeing that they are in and out of the sea constantly all the summer morning through. The razorbills and guillemots, who undoubtedly use their wings as propellers when swimming under water, exhibit nothing resembling this peculiar trait, while the cormorants and shags move beneath the surface entirely by means of their webbed feet. The wings, so sedulously cared for when the birds are out of the water, are always held closely folded to the body throughout the whole time of submersion, or, at least, that is the general consensus of opinion among all who have been able to observe the act. But it is far from easy to learn anything at first hand about the doings of this alert and wary fisher-fowl. Many of the commonly accepted facts about them are traditional, handed down from generation to generation among the sea-coast dwellers from the remote time when cormorant flying was an established and popular sport. In bygone centuries, cormorants were trained to catch fish just as the peregrine falcon was trained for the chase in the coverts and fields. Rich and poor seem alike to have been addicted to this useful pastime of cormorant flying. Even kings of England, notably James I, had each his royal Master of the Cormorants. Both cormorants and shags appear invariably to swallow their prey whole immediately after landing it. Some old Devon fishermen assert that this was done while the bird is still under water, but a little careful watching soon reveals the truth that the small dabs and plaice, which constitute the main part of the cormorant's diet, are frequently brought to the eyrie before being consumed. Then, however, there is no doubt of the way in which the catch is disposed of. It is taken down at a single gulp. Mid-August wanderings on the countryside commonly bring one face to face with what proves to most a startlingly unexpected sight. Where all the woods and lanes are still in their full opulence of summer greenery, a sudden turn of a leafy corner may bring into view a wayfaring tree loaded to the summit with scarlet fruit. Scarlet is the only word indeed for these heaped clusters of wayfaring berries, but the word is pitifully inadequate to convey any real notion of their intensely vivid hue. Seen in the mass, it comes nearer to a true blood red than, perhaps, the colour of any other growing thing. Yet, for all its splendour, it must not be mistaken for the colour of ripeness. Ripe wayfaring berries are black as jet. Each oval fruit in turn makes a sudden change of hue. It is an incessant game of rouge et noir in the hedgerows, and the moment the fruit is ripe it must be eaten by the birds, or it quickly shrivels and rots away. The process is already in full activity, though no other wild fruit is yet within measurable distance of the edible stage. Examined closely, each head of clustered fruit is seen to be half glittering scarlet and half intense black, the interplay upon the eye of the two strongly contrasted shades explaining, no doubt, the gorgeous impression caused on first sight of the tree. Those whose pleasure it is to look on at the pageant of wild growth year by year are little likely to fall into error here, but the chance sojourner on the countryside often confuses the wayfaring tree with the dogwood, and even with the service tree. The latter is really akin to the rowan, and is readily distinguishable by its deeply cleft leaves. There is some reason for confounding the other two, as both have a downiness of leaf and stalk in the younger shoots, and their foliage is much of the same character. But the berries of the dogwood are of an uniform dingy hue. Its real value to the lover of brilliant colour lies in its extraordinarily beautiful autumnal tints, the leaves failing and fading through an infinite gradation of red and purple tones. A peculiarity of the wayfaring tree is that though its leaves are still as green as ever at this time, it has already made notable advance in its preparation for next year's growth. At the apex of every leaf and fruit-laden branch there is a fat grey woolly bud, with a pair of erect leaves, elongated but tightly furled as yet, above and below. When the wheat was still green and full of poppy scarlet and cornflower blue, and riddled through and through with the summer sun, it seemed that sheer dominant intensity of colour could be carried to no further pitch, either by nature or device of man. But now, when it stands ripe and ready for the sickle, 30 acres of it filling the valley between wood and wood, all that pales into insignificance. Under the fierce glow of the August sun, the colour of fully ripened wheat is literally more than human eye can long endure. The poppies and cornflowers are still there, crowding the burning amber deeps with a more vivid lustre than ever. But their light is utterly quenched in the greater light from the myriad sunburnt wheaten stems, such a lambent splendour of colour as one might conceive given off by some gargantuan crucible full to the brim with red-hot gold. Those who are beginning to deplore the imminent end of summer, and affect to regard the countryside now as but a declining radiance day by day, are merely letting old conventions blind them to the true facts. Though the colours of the year's maturity are on the wane, the richer hues of its fruition are only just nearing their full loveliness. The devotee of bright colour in the mass can roam hill and dale at this time and find more than ever for his delight and solace. When these provinces of glowing corn are swept away, there are the lane sides and river sides, downs and purple moorlands, all running sky high with new treasure of living beauty, authentic to summer's end. Every stream has its fringe of crimson loosestrife and sweet fresh carmine of willow herb, and every highway its garland of yellow ragwort, stretching sometimes for unbroken miles. But it is the by-roads and unfrequented lanes that serve more completely than all else to dissipate the old illusion that the passing of summer means the beginning of the end to all things possessed of the loveliness of life, rather than what it really is, but a change from glory to glory. The hedgerows are more burdened with beauty than ever. The great bindweed swings its snow-white bells in every gap, and the little lily-bind makes a broad flange of pink and silver to the beaten track, like milk and wine spilt in the dust. Marjoram, that ever waits for the ripening of the corn before breaking into blossom, is filling the sunshine of all the lanes with cresting rosy foam. Long curving stems of sulphur-hued mullein stand up in the tangle of wayside growth, like spurts of pure flame, and all the bramble brakes are thick sown with living jewellery, The flowers set so close together that it is hard to thrust a fingertip between. A thing that you can very easily pass by, that is familiar indeed, perhaps, not to 1 in 1,000, is the way the common stinging nettle contrives to fertilise its flowers. This is brought about neither wholly by the wind, as with the hazel, nor by the direct indispensable agency of insects, as in so many other plants. It is true that all sorts of creeping and flying atoms throng the nettle thickets at blossoming time, and by these the fertilising process is undoubtedly expedited and rendered more complete. But, if need be, the nettle plant can see to the matter quite well on its own account, without any adventitious aid. If you go to a nettle patch on any warm, still day in August, and watch carefully, you will soon notice a truly astonishing thing. The nettle stems are all about of a height, each topped with a spray of dull purplish-green flower buds. The green of the leaves and this dingy inflorescence unite in a plain of tangled growth, stretching maybe 6 yards between the lane side and the hedgerow. And over the entire breadth of this plain of nettle tops, little white puffs of what looks exactly like far-off battle smoke are incessantly breaking out in the sunshine and drifting, dwindling away into nothing on the faintly moving breeze. If you could suppose yourself on a hilltop looking down upon a wide green coppiced valley wherein a brisk engagement between artillery was in progress, here in miniature is exactly what you would see. A broad sunlit expanse of wooded country with but the one sign of the deadly business going forward. Guns and gunners alike invisible in the deep cover, and only the quick short bursts of smoke showing at intervals here and there in the smiling peaceful green. And now look closer into the maze of nettle blooms, and try to make out precisely what is happening. The queer, curved, many-branched sprays are thick-studded with flower buds, some as yet only tiny green knobs, some all but ready to burst. Among them here and there is a full-blown flower, scarce larger than the buds indeed, yet wide open now and enshrining a little whorl of yellow anthers. While you are staring into the green jungle, noting all this, the spurts of mimic cannon smoke are breaking out all round your zone of sight, far and near. It may be a minute or so before the eye catches one of the nettle guns exactly on the instant of its firing. The gun may go off of its own accord, or some wandering insect may set its trigger free. But sooner or later, if you have come at the right time, verging on towards noon, the nettles will yield up to you their secret. You will see the bud split asunder, spreading its 4 yellow fingers out like a suddenly unclasped fist, and the little cloud of pollen dust goes sailing off, to vanish instantly in the mazy verdant deeps. As the corn yields up its green hue of life and takes on the yellow tinge of coming harvest, so the wild birds cease to sing. The two processes are so gradual as to be almost imperceptible until each is complete. And then there comes a morning in early August when one is awakened not by a glad ripple of music, but by a strange quietude below in the dew-drenched garden. Looking forth under the fringe of glittering diamond drops that tremble along the eaves, one sees a hillside of pure gypsy gold heaped up and radiant in the morning sun. The wheat is ready for the sickle. Mother Earth has done her part, and, resting at last, all living things seem to rest with her. There is a quiet chippering undertone in the garden close, and a sleepy hum of bees in the plain of rosy sainfoin beyond. But in the whole wide valley that lies between the village and the Golden Hill, scarce another sound breaks the morning stillness. Far away on the upland to the north, where they are mowing crimson trefoil, you can hear the machine men against the skyline calling to their teams. And yet it is going very wide of the truth to speak of this time of summer quietude among the birds as silence. There is no real silence anywhere or at any time on an English countryside. And even now hardly an hour goes by but some bird or other remembers bygone times and ventures a bar or two of its old familiar music. To-day, while the morning was still young, a willow warbler came and sang in the clump of silver birches by the lane side. Larks have been up and carolling over the village on and off the whole day through. Scarce an hour, but the ringdove in the little oak wood beyond the garden has been measuring the moments with her drowsy chime. Even when there was no actual song, such an universal chirruping and exchange of call notes filled the sultry summer air far and wide that the general remission of music among the commoner songbirds at this time brings with it little sense of loss. One thing that is almost due now, coming indeed ever with a shock of regret to the true bird lover, is the final departure of the swifts. At this season of calm bright evenings, one has grown so used to seeing a great company of swifts charging round the blue sky with their weird resounding chorus, that summer seems no longer summer without them. When they go, as may happen any day now, a real break comes in the year's melody. But it is only the heaviness that endures for a season. The joy of the morrow's morning may well be a whole new avalanche of robin song. When the wild, free hunting chorus of the swifts stills in the evening sky, it is well nigh infallible token that this so-called summer silence is nearing its end. With the return of the robins from the deep woods to the habitations of men, there can be no more thought of silence among our songbirds. It almost seems as if the robins waited until the last echo of the swifts' jubilant concerto died away, and then started, as with one accord, on their homeward trek. The week that is now ending, earlier perhaps in some favoured districts and still not yet in others, but notably this past week for most localities, has brought to the countryside a general resumption of robin's song. The return of the robins to their old haunts round about the villages marks unerringly the dividing line between summer and autumn. The little wrens have been singing freely at all times of day for a fortnight past, but there is nothing seasonal in the song of the wren. Whether in April or November, it is just the same slender, sibilant, cascading note, and endlessly reiterated monotone that would soon grow irksome but for its unfailing brightness, the simplest and cheeriest of all English wild birds' songs. Robin music is very far from simple, and what brightness it possesses is little more than afterglow, more remembrance than real effulgence. Saving the blackbirds and the nightingales, the robin's song, though in a very different spirit, comes nearer to a human quality of expression than any other. Yet it deals only with the half-lights, the sober, reflective side of things. Go out now into a village garden, or, better still, the adjacent woodlands, on any of these crisp, glamorous, dew-soaked mornings, and, though the calendar tells you it is still high summer, note the unmistakably autumnal ring in every stanza of the robin's song. It is no mournful music, this of the robin. The old conventional idea of autumn as a season of decay and sadness, if it were ever more than a sick town fancy, has no warrant to country eyes and ears kept honestly open in these frank days. With the passing of summer, the failure of pot geraniums on a London window-sill may well bring sad thoughts of dearth and death to come. But autumn in the country is no more than a breathing spell, the year's unbuckling of its armour between one exploit and another, just a brief halt at a journey's end, to count up the gains of one venture brought to ripe issue, ere setting forth reaccoutred and ready for the next. And this is the spirit that infuses the robin's song when, as August passes its meridian, the ruddy breasts begin to show again in the depths of hedgerow green, picked out by the level sunbeams of morning and evening, and the old quaint halting melody returns. The blackbird voices the energy and momentum of young life, the up and doing and daring spirit. The nightingale takes to herself all the emotional and sentimental paraphernalia, but the robin calls a welcome halt to both. Youth is not all, or even the greater part of life, either to humanity or to seasons. And those well on towards the grand climacteric of their days, who find autumn sweeter with every year that glides by, grow to welcome the return of the robin's song at this time with ever greater and greater pleasure. For these, the secret of its charm lies in its undisturbing tranquil beauty, without effort or aspiration, like the music that still throbs in bells long after the eager clappers are at rest. The little robins singing in the garden close sweeten every hour of sunshine for the village dweller to-day. It is only when the robins get back, as they always do at this time of year, from the solitary woodlands to their old haunts among men, and their tender, winsome song begins once more to pervade the gardens, that one realises how quiet the village has been these many weeks back. All through July and now far into August, one has been able to detect scarce sound of bird about the house, save the chippering song of martins under the eaves, and the noisy contention of sparrows in the old ivied walls. But the long summer silence has broken at last. Yet there is no disguising the fact that the robin's tuneful, diffident refrain has nothing in it akin to summertide. Overhead, an almost tropic sun still lords it in the blue, but the robins are back in the village gardens from their long sojourn in the woods, and there is no blinking the truth. The summer is very near its close. Old conventions often die hard. Many go on thinking, and some few writing, of the nightingale as exclusively a night songster, and of the redbreast as unvarying herald of winter frosts and snows. But, as all country folk know, the nightingale sings as much by day as by night, and the rigours of winter are the robin's chief aversion. In fact, the redbreast has an inveterate dislike of all extremes. He is a singer of the half moods, the temperate golden mean of life. Listen to him now in the shady deeps of the orchard close. Every note of the song breathes of autumn, its tranquillity, its assured achievement, its fullness of content. It is rather recitative than melody, soliloquy more than communicated phrase. The robin just sits in his green dim apple bower, conning over to himself the sum of the year's award of things, and finds some so good that his song must break forth in little swift rills of joy, and others so debatable as to need but sober undertone, with more than a tinge of melancholy. Yet it is all so sweet and fresh, so unstudied, that one reaches out sudden welcoming arms to autumn, and the heart falls singing with the bird. End of section 16. Section 17 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 9th month, September, Part 1. The sound of rain on September leaves is quite different from that on the fresh young foliage of early summer. Here in the wood the steady downpour makes, near at hand, a dry, hard, pattering note, merging afar off into a general crisp, whispering hubbub, more like the voice of wind in ripe oats than a sound of falling water. It lacks the music inherent in all young life. Though the wood is still green, and will scarce show a blemish of autumnal hues until October is done, the leaves have lost their suppleness and sappy permeation. The raindrops fall upon them as upon sculptured leaves of stone, and with as little responsiveness. And as it is with the rain over woodlands in early autumn, so it is with the light. The old translucence of the summer leaves is gone. The woods will never be so dark in all the year as they are now, towards the sundown of the long drenching September day. Even in the open rides there is but a dim half-light abroad, and, threading your way through the labyrinth of densely overshadowed tracks, you constantly come upon long winding stretches where deep night seems to have settled down already. These dark, blind regions in the wood are strangely, almost uncannily, silent and bereft of life. Instinctively you hurry through them, tripping at every step, and when the gloom begins to lighten ahead of you once more, and the scurry of a rabbit sounds in the undergrowth, ear and eye greedily seize upon these as they would upon the voice and glance of a friend. Coming out of the wood at last onto the broad hillside, you look across a valley grey and blurred with rain to the far horizon, where, in happier times, the sun would be setting red among the pine tops. There is no sunlight now, nor hope of sunlight. Yet, as the dusk draws on, a curious change in the quality of the light begins to assert itself. The rain drums down harder than ever. The sky is as densely overcast as it has been any moment since the sousing dawn. But by infinite degrees, and in no quarter more than another, the whole drab lowering heaven has suffused with a delicate rosy glow. Green of grass and woodland fails and fades into this soft resplendence. The hillside flowers, white yarrow and lemonweed and purple scabious, take to themselves the same pale orient tinge. The brooks, checkerboarding the grassy levels, turn to threads of shining coral. Even the rain reddens as it falls. Something there is about these wet autumn days ending in such a light, something of the quality of pure elation, for, as the light comes, the wood behind you, so glumly mute a moment ago, breaks into sudden song. The ringdoves fall to crooning, and the moping robins set up a glad ripple far and near. A green woodpecker loops by, mocking yet obviously sympathising with the general exultation. The distant rookery raises a merry clamour. Though the light endures but a moment or two, the dismal spirit of the day is gone. Next morning, out in the open fields, the morning was dim enough under the steady rain and grey, quiet sky, but here in the beechwood there is gloom that might almost be a laggard remnant of the night. And yet it is possible to see wonderfully far on every hand. In beechwoods the trees do not crowd together, nor is there ever more than sparsest undergrowth. The grey, smooth stems stand wide apart on a bare floor spread sombrely with last year's leaves, and overhead the trees link their living foliage together, so that the wood is like a vast hollow shell of matted leafage, through which the light filters, changing the very air to liquid emerald, as though one were walking at the bottom of a deep green sea. So it is all the summer long, and so it is to-day, despite the drab pall of sky and drizzling rain above. Only there lies in wait for you this autumn morning such a surprise, such a shock of splendid colour, as is met with at this time of year alone, and then only by the inveterate wanderer abroad in all weathers. Turning a corner of the path, you come suddenly upon a spot where there is a break in the woodland canopy, and the sombre way lies open to the sky. Almost at your very feet there gleams a broad, intensely brilliant patch of ruddy golden light, so vivid, so dazzling, that you half believe you have chanced upon a spurt of subterranean fire. But it is neither fire nor errant sunbeam, equally impossible on such a weeping, shrouded day. It is merely the first fresh clot of fallen leaves, and the beech is ever the earliest to give this warning note of the imminent autumnal change. Often it is but a single tree in the whole wood that begins the conflagration. Hidden by its fellows, it gradually bronzes over unseen by human eye, until it stands clad from head to foot in burning gypsy gold. And then the glittering spangles commence to fall, and, ever reddening where they gather under the white steep shaft of daylight, form at length this resplendent burst of colour. Ever the beeches first, and then little flares of yellow begin to mark the lane sides where the hedge maples grow, and the brambles turn crimson, and the hazel leaves rim and blotch with purple brown. After these, the elm grove starts its aerial alchemy. Then the birches sprinkle their green robes with amber sequins, and the sycamores light their scarlet beacons in every wood. Last of all, the oaks, just smouldering sullenly away into grim, wintry nakedness brown, leaf by leaf. Until but a few days back, the lane, with its high hedgerows and overspreading oaks, seemed the quietest spot on earth. You trod the green-grown solitary track, passing from long zone to zone of grey shade through slants of hazy, midget-haunted sunshine, and heard no more than a single trill from a robin, or a bar or two of silvery soliloquy from a hiding wren. But to-day all that is changed. The slender music of the wren and redbreast is there still, but it is obliterated, forgotten, in the new, great song that is lifting from the mountains of blossoming ivy in the hedges, and from every green swaddled tree trunk by the way. With the earliest glimpse of morning light, the first honeybees were out and busy in the ivy bloom, and now, at sunny midday, there is a veritable tornado of music from end to end of the lane. And not only hive bees literally by the thousand. There are blue flies and green flies, humblebees and wasps and butterflies and hoarse-voiced Eristalis, a horde of winged, jostling creatures in amber and pearl and steely green or blue and glittering black, and every tiny nameless thing that can fly or climb high enough to take its share in the ivy feast. Standing midway in the length of sun and shadow barred lane, one sees that the whole erstwhile green barricades of ivy smothered hedgerow are coloured with the open flowers as though it had been raining gold dust all night long. It is good on a country ramble to come by chance upon this amazing sight, and be reminded that autumn has its genesis of life as well as spring. But it is better still to have been familiar with it of old, and have expected, watched, its coming these many weeks back. A strange old plant is the ivy green, in nothing stranger than in the time and manner of its blossoming. When the sons of April are urging all other growths into a glory of colour and procreative life, the old ivy drowses by the wayside, dingy and dry and inert save in the shedding of its used-up winter leaves. All the summer long it resists the call of the sunniest hours. But when September arrives, the true springtime flood of growth and life returns to the countryside in this late blossoming of the rare old ivy green. Everywhere beneath its mantle of sombre, shiny foliage, clusters of minute green knobs appear. These grow apace and spread, lengthening their stalks until each cluster looks like a pincushion stuck full of pins with monstrous heads. Now these flower-bud nurseries stand out above the old leaves and become the most conspicuous growth of the hedgerow. Finally, each green knob splits at its apex. 5 little segments fold back like an opening star trap, letting 5 buff-tipped anthers spring into the light and disclosing a yellow-green oval fairly dripping with sweets. In a single morning, the colour of the whole lane is changed from green to gold. The kaleidoscope. It got the name from a first vision of it one fair September morning long ago, and ever after, at this time of year, its changing splendour of colour and life recalls the trumpery metaphor. It is just a bit of narrow lane skirting the foot of a great shoalback hill on the brink of the Sussex Downs. On the one hand, a towering hedge cuts off all view of the lowlands. On the other, the flower-gemmed sward springs sheer from the edge of the white chalk track, and sweeps away, soaring until it brings up suddenly far aloft against the intense blue of the southern sky. It is the bank under the hedgerow where the whole morning sunshine seems to have collected that gives the place its trivial, unsufficing name. Up in the high hedge there are wreaths of blossoming clematis and pink bramble bloom, and strings of bryony berries like cherries, green and yellow and red, and great alcoves full of ripe wayfarer fruit, burning like Moses's bush in the sun. Below these, but still higher than a man's head, stand sulphur spires of mullein and a very thicket of hemp agrimony, the most beautiful growth of the waysides to day, ripple upon ripple of breaking rosy foam. Then comes the marjoram, deep rich magenta purple in the clustered buds, but the open flowers making a soft amethystine mist all along the bank. Lower still, crimson calamint and violet harebell, ragwort and yarrow, and white archangel, knapweed, mallow, chamomile. But these are all abiding things. Though they are for ever trembling and bending in the stir of western air, you can look upon their loveliness for as long as you will. It is the butterflies that give the elusive, kaleidoscopic quality to this shy nook of country lane. In sober truth, there are thousands of them foregathered at this, the great annual love tryst of their kind. Looking down the lane, you can see their brilliant colours lifting and falling in the sunshine, just as though the flowers themselves were getting incessantly upon the wing. Gorgeous red admirals and peacocks with their gay heraldry of crimson and tawny velvet set with mother of pearl, tortoiseshells flashing their burnished copper mirrors from every head of dandelion, brimstones sailing by like magic carpets of cloth of gold, great white butterflies breaking out snowy spinnakers all around you, and furling, spreading them again as swiftly as you look. And amidst all, a sort of undertow of tender shimmering azure, the little blue butterflies, more plentiful than any, for ever dimming the bright eyes of golden ragwort and ruby calamint with their cold pure hues. This yellow ragwort, which all through July and August has been flooding the waysides and woodland clearings, is nearing the end of its beauty. The centre of each high-poised glowing nebula of blossom is slowly whitening as the earliest flowers to bloom ripen their seed pods, every seed equipped with its own little floss silk parachute ready to drift away on the passing breeze. The ragwort is typical of a kind of flowers with a very singular trait. To the naked eye, each spreading umbel consists of a multitude of single flowers of quite simple construction, a central dome surrounded by a ring of bright yellow daisy-like rays, each ragwort bloom, at first glance, looking exactly like a common field daisy, but done all in gold. Daisy and ragwort, indeed, have a near kinship in the fact that, with each, the flower is not what it seems to the casual eye, a separate, simple, star-like form. But, in reality, it embodies 100 or more distinct individual flowers in one. Though a spirit of seemingly reckless spendthrift prodigality infuses nearly all that nature does, ragwort and daisy and the like were begotten of Mother Earth in one of her rare penurious moods. 100 of their flowers must be content to proffer a single chalice between them, for all it be of fine gold. The thing cannot easily be made out unless a strong glass be brought to bear on one of these curious flowers. The daisy is the most typical. It is the daisy's golden eye which is the true daisy, or rather the multitude of them. The banner of shining white petals is only a show sign hung out to lure the winged passer-by. Under the glass, the daisy's eye is seen to be made up of innumerable buds massed together side by side, each of which in turn expands into a 5-petalled yellow blossom centred by a golden pollen rod, the whole curiously like the male vegetable marrow flower in miniature. These buds are continually opening, blooming a while, then fading away into dun shreds. The operation begins at the circumference and works steadily inward, the central buds being the latest to develop. In warm, bright weather, the flowers may come into maturity in quick succession. Cold and gloom, especially in the daisy which shuts up at the least chill, may indefinitely protract the process. But the strange thing is that the encircling whirl of petals keeps its shining freshness for so long as, but no longer then, its attractive work is needed. When the last bud has opened and has been duly fertilised, the rings of gold or silver fail and fall. Seen from the village in the grey, still September morning, the greyest, most dejected region in the whole glum landscape is the far-off, sagging line of the Downs. To go thither in search of colour and life seems the least promising enterprise in the world. But the downland is full of unexpected things. The flowers that love these high-lying wastes, though each is but a minute replica of its great flaunting fellows of the lowlands, make up by sheer numbers what they lack in size. Those who come to the Sussex Downs at the end of summer and see them in the distance so bare and grey are always astonished at the real richness and vividness of growth with which hill and dale are spread. Once the first great shoalback hill is passed, the wanderer finds himself in a veritable arcanum of loveliness. The barren, sunburnt cast, which, from below, the Downs appear to wear, is now seen to be only a blend of every conceivable living colour. Except for the heather and the harebells, there are scarce any unfamiliar to the lowland dweller. The deep, soft grass is studded thick with pink and white clover, golden hawkbit, an infinity of daisies, and even buttercups, pale mauve of scabious, glowing purple of knapweed and star thistle, yarrow white and red, dandelions in plenty still, and a little white umbel, more ubiquitous than any, each of its trim discs a study in delicate, reticent grace. All familiar hedgerow flowers, nothing of mountain strangeness about them. yet each but a half the size of its valley prototype, and all shorn of their long stems, set deep in the sheltering grass bents, harmless of the rough winds, so hidden that you seem to be carrying a charmed circle of flower shine as you move. A dozen yards ahead, the brown, upstanding grasses hide all from the view. But the true downland flowers of autumn, the blue harebells and rose-red heather, these uplift themselves everywhere in bold beauty, and colour the landscape wherever one looks. The grey light has no more power to dim the crimson of the heather than it can quench the murmur of its countless besieging bees. While the heather honey flow lasts, and the autumn chills forbear, neither shade nor shine can still the rich labour chant of the hive bees, even in determinedly showery weather, so that it be warm, the heather is never without its singing host. But the harebells are for the butterflies alone, and most of all for the little blue butterflies that swarm upon the downs at this season. Not one visible now. Where they get to on grey days such as these, or even when a bit of cloud gets into the sun's eye for a moment, is a mystery. But the drab mantle of the sky is wearing thin already. A long, curving silvery rent shows in it to windward, or at least in that direction where the wind would be if there were any perceptible air astir. In an hour, perhaps, the sun and the butterflies will be out together, and then you will see these frail blue harebells doing strange things. For it will be just as though they had taken to themselves wings, flitting hither and thither in the sunshine, so exactly alike are the azure flowers and the flecks of living azure that share their being. On the grey, still September morning, with the sheep and cattle lying down in the fields, and but a stray robin or two breaking the autumnal quietude with his slender plaint, it is almost startling to come upon a cloud of swarming ants at some odd turn in the lane. Loitering under the hedgerows, you suddenly find yourself enveloped by an aerial host of what you take to be midges. The air is misty and dim with their incredible numbers. They spread from about the level of your shoulders to the highest spray in the hedge-top, thousands upon thousands of minute, dark-winged forms. These are the little black ants, using their newly begotten soaring powers in the most thrilling adventure of their lives, the great annual mating flight of their kind. Hitherto they have been nothing but lowly toilers upon earth, their most daring enterprise the ascent of a grass blade, or a wandering cruise up a tree trunk in search of aphis juice. But now, for a short half hour, there has come to them a mysterious dual gift, both the desire and the means to fly. The books on entomology give us the why and the wherefore of this curious habit of the ants in a few terse, confident lines. But it is wonderful how much more there is to learn if an ordinary pair of eyes be carried abroad and turned upon the matter. First, it is seen that these ant swarms are always hovering in the lee of some thick high bush, and this even on the calmest days. Then there is definite order observable in the proceeding, for all it seem at first glance but a chaotic whirl of adventitious atoms. The swarm preserves a distinct and characteristic shape in mid-air, a long oval, pointed at the top, which is next the bush. Though each ant is flying in its own circle, and these inextricably mingled, there is a common progress upward, and the pace of flight increases as the highest zone is reached. Where the cloud of circling insects almost touches the green elder spray, the speed of their intertwining movements wholly baffles the eye. They make together but a grey blur in the air. And every fraction of a second a pair can be seen to lock and fall, making a dark wavering vertical streak upon the grey. But the most curious thing is yet to tell. All the black ant swarms I have ever seen have been accompanied by a smaller swarm of true midges of infinitely tinier form. These midges constitute a sort of advance guard for the ants, hovering just between the highest point of the ant swarm and the adjacent foliage, hundreds of them, indeed, being clustered thick upon the leaves. Bee-masters aver that the honey bees, when swarming, always send out scouts to select a gathering point in advance. Do the midges scout for the ants? End of section 17. Section 18 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 9th month, September, Part 2. Across the sunny woodland ride, from gloom to gloom, tumbling helter-skelter out of darkness into light and back into darkness again, went the rat and weasel, locked together in a deadly embrace. Though I saw them but a moment, I knew it was a weasel who had the rat in grip, by the flash of white showing now and then as the pair rolled madly over and over. And there was no mistaking the low scream of mingled fury, terror and pain that had so suddenly rent the woodland quietude. No other creature but a rat, least of all a great grey buck rat like this one, would have had quite the same power of putting so many various meanings into one shrill outcry, choked and broken as it was. But the little tragedy was all over in a second or two. The harsh, stifled sound and the gruesome sight vanished together into the deep of the wood. I stood looking at the empty space of sunlit green across which the pair had charged, pondering many things. First, as to why gamekeepers wage such ruthless war indiscriminately upon weasel and stoat alike, seeing that it is the stoat only their kind need fear. But every year the harmless weasels, harmless, that is to say, so far as game is concerned, can be seen on the keeper's gibbet by the dozen. In reality, the weasel is a creature that all gamekeepers should preserve, rather than seek to exterminate. Its food consists almost entirely of vermin, rats and mice, moles, no doubt many of the smaller wild birds, but it is the rarest thing to find it preying upon game or rabbits. The larger, stronger, fiercer stoat is the real depredator of the coverts and warrens, and will even raid domestic poultry runs or attack a hare in its form. Weasel and stoat are easily to be distinguished, even when only a momentary glimpse of them be obtained. First, there is the marked difference in size. The weasel who had fastened its deadly grip upon the rat in the wood was actually smaller than its prey, though of greater length in its snake-like flexible body. Then the throat and underparts of a weasel are pure white, while in the stoat these are of a dull, dirty sulphur yellow. Finally, there is the general colour, a sort of mahogany brown, rich in the weasel but much dingier in the stoat, and the fact that the stoat has a black tip to its tail, the tail of the weasel being throughout of the same chestnut hue as its lithe little body. At this time of year, it is strange how all the owls get down to the villages on dark, still nights, especially those following days of raging wind. The stifled, bubbling screech of the barn owl can be heard indeed at most seasons, if one chances to be lying awake. And, so that the air be warm, the little owl, the "Frenchie" of the gamekeepers, is never silent for long, day or night. But, as September draws on, the great brown owl, at all other times a devotee of the remote woodland, comes in from his solitary haunts at each fall of darkness, and cries about the chimney tops by the hour together, mingling his weird wailing song with all the rest. And yet this nightly chorus of the owls, typical of the waning season, is in the aggregate far from being a dispiriting, melancholy sound. The barn owl's long, low, strangled note has a touch of grim, inveterate ferocity about it. But the little owl's sharp, shrill call, echoed and re-echoed across the gardens under the tense darkness, strikes the ear almost with a tinge of careless mirth, for all the little Frenchie bears the worst name for indiscriminate slaughter of any, by reason of his habit of ranging the woods and fields at all hours of the day, as well as after dark. The call of the great barn owl, even when heard thus in the small hours of the autumn night, brings no lugubrious feeling with it. The note is a serious, even solemn refrain, but its undeniably tuneful quality just keeps it on the hither side of mournfulness. To speak of the wood owl's cry as a beautiful sound would be perhaps overstraining fancy. Yet it has strength and a stern sort of sweetness that sets one eagerly listening, even though it be the cause of unwelcome vigils at the end of tired days. Lying thus in the still midnight hour, and drowsily hearkening to this owlet clamour far and near, the question is sure to thrust itself upon one. Why do these creatures, gifted so wonderfully by nature with the power of noiseless aerial progression, yet take so much care to herald their comings and goings in this way? One would think the first hoot of an owl a mile off would serve to drive to safe cover the whole countryside of furred and feathered things. The truth seems to be that, while all this bandying to and fro of call notes between foraging mate and mate fulfils some necessary though inscrutable end, it does not really interfere with good hunting. The note may warn, yet it may give no inkling of the direction whence danger is coming. A wild creature will seldom flee until it has made sure of the road to safety, and the hardest thing in the world, to a human ear at least, is to judge the direction or even distance of an owl's call at night. It may well be that all this nocturnal hubbub but throws the quarry into a state of transfixed alertness. What time the great-eyed, soundless terror swoops down on whom he will. Pealing out suddenly over the valley in the grey quiet of the windless dawn, the thrush's song comes like a herald of a loved yet long absent friend's return. Ever since summer failed, almost the only bird voice in the countryside has been that of the robin. The spinneys and lanes have been full of robin music, but the tender, leisurely refrain savours too much of autumn decline. On his resumption of song in the late September of each year, the thrush, with a single ringing clarion peal at dawn, seems to change the whole order of things. Thus early in the season his song lasts but a moment or two. It is as though suddenly remembering himself after his long moping summer silence, he had got out the neglected silver pipe from its forgotten corner, and, in no wise intending to play as yet, nevertheless sent a breath through the dusty keys as promise of melodious days in store. He may not tune up again for a week to come, or tomorrow's light may grow to a perfect salvo of his stirring, revivifying music. But sooner or later now he will settle down to his grand role of winter's chief musician in good earnest. Little as it seems generally to be known, the close of January ever finds the thrushes in full imperious song. The missel thrush, on the other hand, is only occasionally heard until the old year is near its end. His reputation as a songster is something of a mystery to the country dweller unversed in the conventions of the older bird books. How, indeed, the missel ever rose to the degree of a singing bird in the estimation of any is a puzzle, seeing that his performance is little more than the wearisome reiteration of a single, rather vapid phrase. Such as it is, however, there is plenty of it, once it starts, and it gains immeasurably by the fact that the missel thrush sings apparently without any regard to wind and weather. Cold or warmth, storm or shine, he carries on indomitably, nor seeks to shelter himself from the elements, no matter how unfriendly they may be. In this thoroughly British trait lies, perhaps, the secret of his common repute as musician, otherwise unexplainable. But the sensitiveness of the little song thrush to the mood of the times is a still finer and more valued thing to one used to being abroad on the green countryside at all seasons. His song grows to be an index of the beatitudes of rural life. When the darkness begins to fall outside the lattice, and one can just make out the flickering bats against the grey east, it is good to learn that the western wind still holds by the fact that a song thrush is merrily tuning up below in the garden. And the dawn that breaks austerely quiet and chill and crystal clear, save for a half-hearted robin or timorous wren to welcome it, holds no surprises or regrets. One would as soon expect to see roses in the snow as to hear a song thrush on a nipping raw nor'western morning. Wandering over the downs on any of these sunny, still September days, one is sure to come upon a bird that at once arouses curiosity. Though it has no arresting brilliance of hue as seen threading warily through the long dew-diamonded grass, or perching on bramble or juniper, foreigner is written plain on every feather. Its colours, as visible then, are but sober greys and browns. Yet the bird wears them in such clear-cut contrast and in so outlandish, so harlequin a fashion, that a traveller is inevitably reminded of eastern lands and their flitting, chattering crew. And when this queer little fowl gets on the wing, as he will instantly do if the observer make but the slightest movement or sound, the association becomes still more complete. For as he speeds away from you, flying in loops like a finch or woodpecker, his tail coverts gleam up in the morning sun, white as snow. One of the strangest things about these wheatears, now so common singly upon the downs just before their migratory southward flight, is that, though all the old country books speak of incredible numbers being trapped by the shepherds on the Sussex Highlands every autumn, one never sees flocks of wheatears, hardly ever more than 2 or 3 together at most. And yet, that they still exist, probably in as great numbers as of old, is patent to anyone accustomed to roam these high-lying, lonely wastes in the fall of the year. The explanation, of course, lies in the fact of the markedly unsociable, solitary habits of the race at these times. Nature seems to spread them out over the land as dust dropped upon water spreads, each atom shunning its immediate fellows. And a stranger thing still is that the South Down shepherd, who appears to have changed not a jot in any other respect, perhaps for centuries past, has certainly given up almost entirely now a pursuit that, only a couple of generations back, must have brought in a considerable revenue to his class. Wheatear trapping today is not only an obsolete calling, it is well nigh a lost art. For all the wheatear still loves to explore any dark and secret cleft in the sward, as he did of yore, how to construct the little tunnels under the turf, and in what subtle fashion to lay the horsehair nooses that ensnared the burrowing birds, you shall not gain knowledge of nowadays in half a life's diligent inquiry among the oldest shepherds of the time. If the coming winter prove a long and rigorous one, it is fairly certain that there will be something very like famine among the wild birds of the land. Look where one will in southern England now, the signs portending hard times are all too evident. The hawthorn fruit, which forms the main part of the berry crop, is almost a total failure. With September more than half done, the hedgerows should be already flashing scarlet under their load of fruit. But in a whole day's tramp through any typical stretch of country, you will hardly find a dozen bushes fully laden with the fast ripening haws. Of the second principal source of winter provender for the feathered creatures of the countryside, the hips or roseberries, little that is more reassuring can be said. At a generous estimate, the visible crop is scarce half what it should be in normal years, and for this we have to thank the cold, wet weather which prevailed in June, when most of the roses were blowing. The holly is in slightly better case. Nearly all the bushes show a sprinkling of pale red berries, sparse though it is. But none have the tight-clustered wealth of coral fruit, sheathing the whole stem and mounting high in every bush, so characteristic of good holly years. The danger of all this to our native wild birds lies not so much in the probability of lean days to come with themselves alone dependent on the home store, as in the well-nigh certain event of the berry shortage being prevalent in other countries, thus causing a larger seasonal influx than ever of foreign birds. In some winters, these migrants from the north-west come over in incredible hosts, and sweep the land bare of food wherever they pass. With their home resources for themselves alone, however meagre these may be, and however protracted and severe the winter, our native birds will at least have a chance. But any overplus of foreign starvelings in their midst is sure to precipitate disaster. Luckily, or providentially, there is something to set in the hither scale. Never, perhaps, did the ivy show greater promise for a superabundant harvest of its queer-looking greenish fruit. No more than promise as yet, indeed, for the ivy is still only just verging on its flowering time. But every swathed tree-stole and mantled hedge and wall is fairly smothered with ivy buds, already throwing out a furtive golden anther or two. It wants but a few days' warm sunshine to bring all out into a glory of yellow blossom, burdening the air with a scent of honey, and luring every bee and wasp and butterfly of the countryside to the bounteous feast. Harvest is finished on the upland farm, and in every field the jingling ploughs are out breaking the stubbles under the soft autumn sunshine. All but on the 10-acre, the last spit of cultivatable land glowing afar off like a tongue of fire hard against the misty blue wall of the downs. A strange colour truly for a field in mid-September. Yet there is only one English wild flower that can set a whole hillside aflame at this or any season. Coming to the 10-acre after a long tramp through dew-drenched lane and footpath, you stand on the brink of the remote solitary field at last, and look out over the scantiest crop of oats that ever eye beheld. Corn which is not worth the reaping, and now never will be reaped, yet which is full of a glad compensation to all but the farmer, a beautiful scarlet underflow of poppies, rich as on any summer's day gone by. Early as you have come to this forlorn and lovely outpost of human effort, a host of wild creatures are here before you. The upper part of the field is black with rooks and daws, scrabbling busily amidst the lean yellow swathes, and filling the air with an unceasing clamour, the deep hoarse note of the rooks playing bass to the jackdaw's high yelping chorus. The smaller birds are here in numbers past all belief. Every sparrow of the countryside seemingly, starlings by the hundred together, linnets, chaffinches, siskins, greenfinches, pigeons, and here and there a white wing lifts in the glowing prospect, telling that even the great herring gulls find here something to their taste. Through the hubbub of rook and daw and the shrill medley of lesser voices comes now and again the trumpet of a pheasant and the wheezy call of partridge hiding under the scarlet and gold. All this high-lying southern country is overrun with hares, and it would be strange if the derelict oatfield had none to show to-day. When the ploughs come at last to turn all under, poppies and abortive crop alike, hares in plenty are sure to get up out of their forms almost from under the horses' very feet, and go racing off like the wind. There is a hare now, but a dozen yards away, moving in the dense poppy growth. You cannot see him, but you know he is there, for between every mouthful as he feeds, his black ear tips are thrust high aloft, searching the air for sounds of danger. Yet he is not battening upon the oats like the rest of the wild things about him. He has come to the field lured by the same sight that's brought yourself thither, only to gratify another and more material need. To the hare, a fresh young poppy is at all times an irresistible dainty. Presently, as he ventures out upon a bare spot of ground, you mark his peculiar method of devouring them. It is just like the ancient children's game of bob cherry. He bites the green poppy stem off close to the root, and then sits up contentedly, chewing it in until the flower, gradually approaching his mouth, at a sudden sidelong gulp, finally disappears. Coming down the green ride through the hazelwood, you would have known that there were others here before you, even if there had been no far-off murmur of children's voices upon the air. The jays would have revealed that fact clearly enough. Incessantly their single harsh warning cries ring to and fro in the dim, quiet glades, and whenever you catch sight of one of the birds, he is going at full speed, alarmed yet angry at what he evidently deems an unwarrantable invasion of his rights. Jays, when not moved by a common danger, seem to spend most of the hours of daylight quarrelling. If you manage to get near a party of them, and the sound of their strife continues, it is the surest sign that they still believe themselves alone in the wood. In this southern county, nutting time seems to get earlier every year. The ancient village rule used to be that the nuts were left until the blackberries were done. But already there are coming in as many baskets heaped up with what looks like pale green foam as there are baskets sombre and dripping with the luscious bramble fruit. Old and young alike are off to the woods nutting, but the children make the best gatherers. A hazelnut always hides under a leaf, and thus is most readily seen from below. The Saturday school holiday brings the young voices betimes into the woodland solitudes, and the jays have not had a word amiss since dawn. The big hazelnuts, pale greenish white blotched with rose, and each set in a dainty antlered cup of emerald, make lure enough for anyone on this soft September morning. But there is a new wonder, as well as a new beauty, in the woods to-day. Coming to them with thoughts bent only on the season as a time of fruition, of the earth's autumnal rest from labour, one is startled to find not autumn and all it conventionally stands for, but the vigorous life of spring already actively in train. Every hazel leaf now has a next season's bud swelling green at the base of its stalk, starving the old leaf of sap, and steadily, inexorably, pushing it off the main twig. And the catkins, the male hazel flowers that in February will fill the woods with a shower of verdant light, these show everywhere in the labyrinth of branches overhead. Pendulous green lobes, 3 or 4 together, some fully an inch long, though still tight closed. A few, indeed, already loosening and lengthening, perilously unmindful of the coming winter days. It is always the crowded, mutually protecting hazels that first give the quietus thus, to the ancient illusion of autumn as a season only of decline and death. But once the truth has been forced upon you of the fat green hazel buds and swelling catkins in September, you look about wherever you go, and soon realise that the same impulse is upon all growing things. One year's brimming chalice of life drained, nature begins to fill again with the old rich wine without a moment's pause. End of section 18. Section 19 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 10th month, October, Part 1. When the sea fog is up amongst the hills, and, all the dull quiet morning through, the village roofs and tree-tops are lost in a thick white canopy, the never-ceasing song of the wrens in the gardens just saves the day from being one of dispiriting gloom. Today the October dawn was a full hour behind its time, but the wrens had taken no count of that. In the muffled twilight, long before the robins had plucked up heart or the rooks stirred in their eyries, there was a wren singing amidst the dripping apple boughs under my window, as though it were a summer's day. It is in its inviolability of type, its constancy rather to a temperament than a season, that the value of the wren's song chiefly lies. As the darkness slowly lightened, I lay and listened to the song, and wondered where its blithe content came from in all that chilly shrouded void. Minute after minute the song stemmed on in the silence. No mellow clear pipe tuned with subtle artistry, nor, indeed, anything in it that could be called music. But just a sweet whispered babbling, a running on of slender silver tones, the one tripping the other up ceaselessly, a never-ending succession of odds and ends of simple, pleasant sound, like the low talk of the water brooks. All the songs of English wild birds may be said to have some more than fanciful kinship or other with human feeling, if only lovers of the countryside could agree as to the precise tendency. But there need be little variance of opinion as to where the song of the wrens is to be placed. You cannot listen to the wren year in and year out, in storm or shine, easy times or adverse times, without linking her up inevitably with the sort of simple human nature whose instinct is to make the best and brightest of things. The robin is hard to daunt. There are few times of year, except in the parching heats of summer, when his quaint recitative fails in the hedgerow. Yet, though he is no fair-weatherous songster, the robin's hardihood is more than half self-conscious pose, and he ever contrives to put a touch of gentle, fictile melancholy into his gayest measure. He will not own that art can ever tolerate a happy ending, even to the merest trifling stanza of his lay. But the wren's song is all serene, contented jollity, though it be on so minute and unassuming a scale. Heard in the gloom of the chilly fog-bound morning, it brings a catch to the heart that is almost repentance at dour thoughts too ready in recrimination of the absent sun. Out there in the cold, bedraggled and hungry, shelterless among the soaking apple boughs, the very air but a less ponderable form of water, still she sings, and sings again, filling the wan, shrouded, moping world with her little bright shreds and tatters of music, as a darkened chamber will be filled with golden dust motes by a penetrating beam of light. Coming out upon the hillside in the first clear light of dawn, and looking eastward, I could see nothing of the valley for the dense ground mist lying far below me like a lake of milk, with here and there the highest tree-tops sharply piercing its level of formless white. The day was breaking in a flood of silvery light streaming up behind a trellis of deep grey cloud that covered the whole eastern sky. Strong, fine, wavering parallels of smoke-pearl grey silhouetted upon the shining horizon wall. The light strengthened. Slowly, here and there in the steep, dark griddle of cloud, there came a spot of tender rose. Almost imperceptibly, these touches of soft, stealthy colour grew and multiplied until every cloud bar stood rimmed beneath with vague rosy dapples of light. Then, with a curious suddenness, these myriad spots of faint colour glowed up everywhere into clear, soft crimson, dyeing the whole heaven in a fiery lustre, and changing the lake of milk-white mist below into a lake of rich red wine. Just for one radiant, transforming moment. And then the whole eastern sky as suddenly paled down again into sober, sombre grey upon silver, with the one central, ever-strengthening zone of gleaming, snow-pure white. But red sky in the morning does not always mean a rainy day to follow. The rule has one exception, invariably, as far as I know, and this is when the morning red is followed by a clear yellow sunrise, the red rain roses nullified by the true sunflowers of gold. Thus it came about, this silent, shrouded autumn morning. Presently, far behind the smoke-grey trellis of eastern cloud, a sudden fleck of amber showed in the silver void. Another and another fleck shot into view, until the whole east was gloriously littered with them as by innumerable floating golden feathers, and the snow-pure, ultimate air warmed into azure scarce discernible at the earth-line, but tenderly deep above. Then I saw that a second vertical grill of cloud, almost the exact counterpoint of the first, yet infinitely more remote, stood in the heaven, and that the sudden shoal of amber sunbeams had been caught in this as in a trammel net suspended in the far-off skies. Moment after moment the glory grew, above and below. The fog-bound earth took the fever of it from the golden morning, and lit up beacon fires on every hill. The tree clumps, standing breast high in the mist of the valley, turned to golden islands in a golden sea. Behind me, in the dew-drenched wood, a wren began her simple, twittering melody, as though to shame the silence of greater singers. A line of black rooks swept noisily across the resplendent sky. The first direct ray of sunshine struck over the shrouded valley, drawing, as it seemed, an instant deep note from something behind me. Turning, I saw a great ivy-tod in full bloom, already besieged by countless insects, all steeped in the gorgeous sunflower hue, in the golden blossom, golden bees making gold instead of honey. There is only one time in all the year when the country lanes are thronged with flowers, and yet almost destitute of the murmur and glitter of insect life. As you stand looking down the long, winding vista of elm-fringed road, its green verges still bright as ever with yarrow and scabious, purple knapweed and golden chamomile, not a butterfly stirs from end to end, nor a bee drones in the wayside blossom. A week ago the lane was alive with every sort of minute winged creation, but to-day, though the morning is just as sunny and mild and still, all have mysteriously vanished. These past warm days have brought the ivy of the whole countryside into full bloom, and butterflies and bees, with every tiny atom that can fly or crawl, have hastened to the feast. And yet, though the flowery borders of the lane are mute for a season, there is a richer volume of music than ever resounded overhead. As you wander through the sun-barred way, every ivy-clad elm trunk that you pass hums like a telegraph post in a gale. Where several trees stand close together, the sound attains a surprising depth and intensity. The whole mass of ivy is covered with gold-green clusters of blossom, each besieged by a scrambling horde. Honey-bees and wasps mainly, black and yellow-furred bumblebees by the score, great shining bluebottles weaned for the nonce of their penchant towards carrion, hundreds of creatures whose existence you never even dreamed of, flies with bodies of checkered mother-of-pearl, flies half crimson and half shimmering emerald, lean, elongated creatures like threads of green or amber knitting silk, and, mingling with all, great gorgeous butterflies, tortoiseshells and painted ladies and red admirals, their brilliant wings showing in the sunlight like the sails of a fleet of pleasure yachts veering together over a sparkling summer sea. Yet there is a vein of sombre, even tragic, circumstance about this vision of stirring life and prosperity which the time of the ivy's blooming brings to the countryside with every October. As the crowd of insects hustles together, contending for the sweets, the sepals and anthers of the flowers are disengaged, and a fine green drift continuously floats down through the sunny air. 4 yards round each tree the roadway is soon littered deep with these particles. But many of them are caught by the spider webs that fill the hedgerows underneath. Every web now, at ordinary times almost invisible, stands out the most conspicuous object of the lane side. When the heavy autumn dews load the spider webs with glittering water beads, each bead a warning signal that the silliest midge can understand, the spiders must fain go hungry until the sun has drunk the webs dry, bringing back their invisibility and usefulness together. But this clinging litter from the ivy spoils the webs forever as an effective snare. There is nothing for it but to wait fasting till the shower is over for the day, and then to cut the useless cumbered net adrift and weave anew. When the May blossom season has been particularly fine, it is sure to bring a wonderful berry harvest in its train, and the hedgerows to-day are flushed with a richer, deeper red than any but the oldest of us can match from memory. But the hawthorn fruit, for all its exceptional abundance, makes up only half the brave show. The hips are almost as plentiful, and even brighter of hue. The holly everywhere is full of great clusters of berries just reaching their authentic shade of true vermilion. Black bryony drapes the hedge with scarlet and green, while the red bryony hangs out necklaces like threaded cherries, ranging from pale yellow to deepest claret. The nightshade berries, softest and richest red of all, glow in every thicket, and up against the blue sky there are showers of rose-pink spindle fruits, like cleft satin cushions, with a bead of vivid orange nestling in the heart of each. The old saying that an abundant berry harvest means a hard winter to come is, in common experience, just as often refuted as confirmed by fact. But whether the wild bird's larder be well or ill provided, the season severe or mild, there is sure to be enacted one very interesting manoeuvre during the lean months to come. Though the whole winter's store is now visibly thrown open, and every creature free to squander the good things as it will, the supply is never actually thus dissipated, but is always carefully husbanded, rationed out, as it were, by the plants themselves. The secret lies partly in the fact that the berries ripen successionally, and partly in their varying degrees of attractiveness to the birds. The hawthorn, however, is an exception to this law. The whole mayberry harvest of a district seems to arrive at edible condition at much the same time, and rapidly disappears, being as much wasted as consumed by the feathered flocks that are now beginning to range the countryside everywhere. But the berries next in favour with the birds, the great scarlet hips, warn off the voracious improvident crew by a very ingenious device. Though all take on the hue of ripeness from the beginning, each berry preserves an adamantine quality, impregnable to the strongest bill, until the moment of full maturity is reached, when the whole fruit suddenly softens into a juicy pulp. Thus a regular proportion of the roseberries is daily released for consumption throughout the entire winter. The holly bushes keep themselves in reserve as a late supply on a different but equally effective plan. As holly berries are fairly soft at all times, and of so conspicuous a colour, they would fall an early prey to the hungry hordes, except for the fact that, though nutritious, they are decidedly unpalatable. Holly berries are only eaten by birds as a last resort. In the same way, we owe the plenitude of berried mistletoe at Christmas to the fact that this wild fruit is of such an obstinately glutinous nature that none of the smaller birds can deal with it, nor, indeed, any of the larger, except it be swallowed whole. End of section 19. Section 20 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 10th month, October, Part 2. Against the old cider house was reared a very mountain of apples, no less, and wagons were continually arriving, bringing more and more. It was apple harvest time, and every able-bodied soul on the farmstead was out in the orchards helping to gather in the fruit. There are many things about Devonshire cider making, at least the old-fashioned way of it, that strike the unconversant looker-on with wonder, even perhaps with a little dismay. This ancient crushing house, in use at the apple farm for generations, manifestly harbours the accumulated litter and dusty cobwebs of ages. The pulping gear and vats and troughs are black with long service. The old stone and thatch building is dark and dank as the grave. Also, the apples are left to lie under the trees too long, one would say, after picking. The most casual glance detects a large proportion of rotting fruit among them, and, undeniably, a vast deal of earth and odd debris gets carried in with them to the crush. but the scene in the old cider house is picturesque enough. In one shadowy bay, a placid old horse is trudging eternally round in a circle, communicating the necessary motion to the crushing gear. Above the mill is a great square aperture in the wall, through which pours a constant thudding torrent of apples thrown in from the mountain heap outside. The ancient machinery makes an incessant grinding, creaking tumult, and the horse's hoofs a low thunder on the earthen floor. The air of the place is heavy with sweet, tense vapour from the fermenting cider in the long row of vats. Within, there is an unending deep, slow burr of Devon tongues, and without, a cackle of poultry and lowing of kine in the adjacent farmyard, all just as it has been perhaps for unnumbered centuries gone by. Tucked away in some dim, steamy, fragrant corner of the building, out of the way of the busy throng, where I have inveigled the old farmer into a few moments' talk, I soon begin to learn things about apples and cider making I had little dreamed of before. The quality of Devon cider, he tells me, has been deteriorating for many years past, and must still further decline in the future. The reason for this is that the old small cider apples, the butter boxes and smack my girdles and Beckington Greys, and all the rest of the ancient sorts, are steadily going out of cultivation. As the old trees wear out or fall, only the larger table apple kinds are being planted in their place, as it pays much better to grow these, seeing that they fetch 4 times the market price. Eventually the small, heavy-cored cider apples must become extinct, and the cider will be made chiefly from windfalls and throwouts of the larger varieties. The quality of cider, it seems, depends on the cores. The more cores that go into the mash, the choicer the cider will be. So the Devon cider of the future will bear no comparison with the older brew. There are 2 strange sounds breaking the quiet of the riverside woods to-day. The one is a crisp, low, sibilant note, endlessly yet intermittently repeated, and, though so subdued, yet curiously distinct in the hush of the keen, bright, frosty morning. The soft, rustling tones come and go, now singly one after the other, true as the beat of a clock, and now in urging, over-tripping medleys of quiet sound, as if a sudden flow of wind were sweeping the tangle of foliage, though not a breath of air moves under the violet sky. The frost of a single night has worked this strange thing upon the ash trees, as hard frost always does, coming thus early in the season. Yesterday the trees stood up here and there in the woodland, clothed to their summits in verdure, fresh almost as in its summer prime. To-day the great ash sprays, albeit green as ever, are breaking away wholesale and falling to earth with that curious rustling sound to be heard now, near and far, in every wood. In a few days the ashes will have shed their whole garniture of leaves. The other sound which so strangely breaks in upon the hush and stillness of the riverside wood is very different in character. The sound is like the incessant ringing of innumerable tiny bells. It is heard only by the waterside, where the great oaks stretch their mammoth branches far out over the river's glassy flow. Like the sound of the falling ash sprays, it comes by fits and starts, and then in whole torrents of plashing sound together, and again in single rhythmic tones, as though the river were one vast campanile, and a solitary ringer for ever passing idly from chord to chord. What he stands listening to now, in the sunny quiet of the autumn morning, may well puzzle one unused to being out of doors in the country at all seasons, unless he has learned to take into account what sudden changes these first sharp October frosts work upon all growing things. And here is one of the simplest, yet most telling, in nature's mysteries of music. Clear and sweet in the calm morning air, the melody ripples on, every varying its pace and depth and quality, and until one actually goes to the river's brink and sees the fat green acorns incessantly dropping, each as it touches the water, striking out its own pure sweet note, it is hard to believe that such a bewilderingly beautiful effect can be wrought by so slight a means. The overnight's frost has loosened the full-grown acorns in their cups, that is all. And now, under the touch of the sunshine, they are letting go their last frail anchorage, and giving the drowsy old river a song for its daytide dreams. In the hedgerows now, the spiders are all in pairs, every spinning Jill, with her courting Jack hovering somewhere in the leafy background, though often hard to see. You may know the male spider by his longer, leaner body, his bristly, rufous legs, and the curious fact that he carries before him a pair of curved, club-ended feelers, for all the world as if he were equipped for a boxing match. And for him it is indeed an unpeaceful, often perilous business, this annually recurring impulse of his to go a-courting. Whether it be true or not that the female spider brings the honeymoon to a close by devouring her mate, I do not know. I have never witnessed the act. But it is true enough that, at this time, the females are all in a moodish, overwrought state, and the males, though incontrollably obsessed of a desire for their company, are nevertheless filled with an unmistakable dread. Wandering along the hedgerow on any of these calm, sunny autumn mornings, you see plenty of the female spiders, who alone spin the webs, sitting motionless in the centre of their snares. But the males are not easy to discover on a casual survey. Yet, with a little patient watching, one will presently be observed moving cautiously from his ambush under a leaf and setting one foot timorously on the outermost strand of the web. Though his touch is so light, the female at once shows her knowledge of his advent by a start and a sort of bridling movement, but otherwise as yet retains her inert, indifferent mien. Venturing over the net by slow degrees, each step obviously as much impeded by abject fear as impelled by desire, the male draws near, until at last, becoming suddenly bold, he makes a little headlong rush towards the coveted prize. Then one of two things immediately happens. Either the female turns upon the intruder like a very tigress, and he is off again into ambush with the speed of light, or she herself flees, leading him a giddy, tortuous dance through the surrounding foliage that may last for minutes together. but it always seems to end in one way. Sooner or later the pursuing male tires and falls to the rear, stopping at last dead beat and going usually to crouch under the nearest leaf. The female stops also, and thus they remain for another minute or so, eyeing each other from afar. Presently you note that the female spider is getting restive. She gives herself a coquettish twirl or two, and then gently creeps towards her suitor. He, now in his turn, playing the chilly, indifferent game, but evidently watching her approach with the same apprehension leavening his desire. She draws so near as almost to touch him, when suddenly she whirls round, and in a moment they are off once more together on the old interminable love chase. If one lives near to wood or forest, sound sleep is not easy to come by on these still October nights. There are so many furred or feathered creatures alert and calling to each other far and near, and the voices one hears on warm nights differ essentially from those that keep one waking on nights of chill. Warm nights in October are generally cloudy and impenetrably dark, while cold nights are often crystal clear. If you did not feel the warm air stealing over the face as you lie listening near the open window, you would know the mild western weather is still held by the fact that the little brown owls are challenging each other everywhere round the old house. Day or night, the cry of the little owl is a sure index of the times. Where he gets to in frost-bound seasons is hard to say, but his shrill wild note that echoes so continuously round the village gardens on these tepid, muggy nights is almost never heard in weather that is cold and clear. On frosty nights of flinching starshine or stark serenity of moonlit chill, it is the great brown owl alone that fills the autumn quiet with her hollow music. Of all eerie sounds that ever came from throat of bird, this is the most arresting. Traditional representations of the cry do not help one much in conveying an impression of it. The ancient "to-wit to-woo" is hopelessly far from the truth. The brown wood owl's note is more like the winding of a great hunting horn, loud and wild and free, yet full of a winsome, deliberate harmony, sustained, maybe, for hours together. The night that is just gone rang with the fearsome, sweet, unhurried sound from its first darkness through to earliest blink of dawn. Now and again, too, a curlew went over with her weird, harsh, jangling cry, and once a far-away whimpering chorus grew into earshot, and across the moon's dim, half-averted face, incredibly far above, a line of dark forms sped like a flight of shaftless arrowheads, wild geese perhaps on their remote annual trek to the meres of some remote and unknown land. But the strangest sound of all on these tense, breathless autumn nights is the calling of the red deer in the forest land beyond the thread of glittering silver that marks the river's course. At any other time of year one may wander through the leafy fastnesses for miles and get no more than a glimpse of the herd careering over the next hill. But this is the time of the roaring, the brief love-making season for the red deer, and one goes to the forest at one's peril. The hinds are harmless enough, huddled together timorously here and there in the open glades. But the stags are all mad with jealousy, spending every moment of daylight and darkness bellowing savage defiance at each other from opposing hill crests. Away on the hill farm, the threshing mill has been humming all day long, and now, in the serene golden light of evening, the deep, quiet voice of it holds the ear as persistently as ever. Looking up towards the farm, you note that the 3 or 4 corn ricks silhouetted against the sky for weeks past have vanished, all but a single inconsiderable stump, and that a great mountain heap of straw has risen hard by. Obviously the hired threshing gang is working late so as to finish the job before dusk and be off to the next farm with the earliest grey of morning. It is the fashion to deplore the use of power mechanism in agriculture as destructive of the old aesthetic country spirit. But in this regard, the steam threshing machine, at least, has given more than it has taken away. When they are threshing at the hill farm on these bright, still autumn days, the whole village is pervaded by a soft, continuous music of a siren-like charm, impossible to resist. Hour after hour the rich, quiet, solemn voice dwells on, unceasing, yet ever varied in pitch and tone and volume, rising now into a grand sweet organ peal, and now subsiding into a low, mellow tenor note with the whisper of the wind in it, though not a breath moves under the violet sky. And through it all the engine beats steady time, a measured throb that ever breaks the music into low ripples as it comes stealing down the green hillside. And now and again, bringing the artistic caesura into the line, a sudden high note as of a vast sheet of silver foil incontinently shaken, the song of the great flapping, erratic leather belt linking up the 2 monstrous machines. The evening light droops dimmer and more richly golden. In the east the night blue is climbing up the steep of the sky, and one bright flinching star point has already broken through. Over darkling meadow and wood and down an indescribable, unearthly stillness broods. You come out into the deserted village street and look towards the hilltop, where the white plume of steam from the busy engine is alone discernible under the failing light. In the intense quietude, the song of the threshing machine seems louder and clearer than ever. But you know, with darkness so near, there can be only a few more sheaves to put through the mill. And then must come what you have been waiting for, what indeed any true country lover would wait a long hour to hear. Sweet as is the song of the threshing mill heard all through a calm sun-bright October day, it is its last drawn-out appeal that sums up, interprets, its whole mysterious beauty. And now this comes to you over the intervening zone of owl-haunted wood and field. First you see the steam shut off, and then the whole contrivance begins to slow down to a halt. Every stage in this deliberate process is marked by a change in the rich, tranquil symphony. Note by note, each tone quieter and more leisurely, the music falls through an entire double octave of the scale, until it dies away at last in the profoundest, softest bass. End of section 20. Section 21 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 11th month, November. In the calm November sunshine, it is difficult to believe that only yesterday the northeast wind was roaring in the treetops under a bleak, drab sky, and the air full of careering snowflakes or icy sleet that drove upon the face like scraps of jagged iron. Only the bare ash trees stand in the wood to-day, mute witnesses of the wintry raid gone by. It is doubtful whether one in a score, even among country folk bred and born, has ever seen the ash in its full autumnal dress. Pass beneath any of the naked trees to-day, and you tread ankle deep in fallen leaf sprays of richest seaweed brown. A tree clad in that softly lurid colour would arrest the eye in any prospect, even in red November. But it is nearly always in this wise with the ash. For weeks past the oak woods have been bronzing, and the beeches taking on a warm russet, and the maples flushing scarlet, and the elms hanging out banners of gold. Only the ash, of all forest trees, has withstood October's insidious alchemy, and has kept its green summer robe inviolate to the last. But there comes the inevitable cold snap as November draws on. The first sharp frost begins the work, and the rough wind does the rest. One morning the ash stands green as in days of June. The next, every spray is cast to earth, littering the whole waggon-way inches deep in emerald. But the green road lasts only an hour or two. This mild, still morning, when the sunshine lies like liquid amber in all the crevices of the hills, and the thrushes are beginning to remember old songs, the fleeting colour has already vanished. Bare grey branches stretch overhead against the blue sky, every slender twig beaded thick with coal-black buds. When the hot sun of noon has contrived to rouse the slumbering zephyrs, you shall hear the authentic voice of winter again, the song of the wind through naked boughs, while yet no other tree has let fall a tithe of its ruddy foliage. But of a truth, red November makes good its right to the ancient name only in a single season here and there within a decade. All depends on the weather. If the rough gales and the frosts forbear, the beechwoods will burn on for weeks to come, and every elm will be aflame to light the woodland way. In certain favoured seasons, a few of the more sheltered oaks and most of the young beech saplings will retain their whole panoply of brown leaves all the winter through. Even strong winds, so that the frosts abstain, will not balk November of its traditional colouring. Every morning now, the first token of wildlife astir in the world is the clamour of the rooks as they drift over the sleeping village, hundreds strong, high up against the misty November sky. Coming out into the garden to look up at them in the first silvery gleam of dawn, you find it hard to distinguish in the outset exactly what is going forward. Though the whole vast multitude is gradually veering towards the eastward light, the birds individually seem to be facing and moving all ways. Scarce a flutter of a wing is to be seen. The whole ceaseless gyration of the throng is maintained almost entirely by slow circles and spirals performed by each bird, the combined effect being that of an intricate dark pattern woven upon the faint frosty blue of the sky. And all the time, this strange sound, so deliberate yet so forceful, fills the air. The common purpose, whatever it be, voiced by this great surging melody. As you stand listening and wondering at the depth and volume of the sound, and the immensity of the streaming host, sight and sound pass over together. In a minute or two, both have dwindled away into the far silence of the lowlands, and the sun pours over the hilltop. The milk-white autumn morning is suddenly transfixed by 1,000 flashing golden swords. This great travel song of the rooks marks the beginning of every day of open weather in November. But it is not a sunrise chorus alone. Scarce an hour of the day goes by without the like scene being enacted. The whole countryside seems to be swept by these wandering battalions of the skies, nearly always soaring at a great height, and coming from no point of the compass in particular, ever observing the same strange method of advancement, a steady, gradual progress of the entire company in one definite direction, yet incessant variance in individual flight, so that, at all times, a good half of the throng may be circling and swaying on an opposite course. So long as the mild November weather lasts, the whole rook population of the country seems to be restless and capriciously astir as bees at swarming time. Though, far below in the valley, the white sea fog still hides all the village but its glittering steeple vane from view, here in the heart of the Downs the calm clear morning sunshine is filling the dew-drenched grass with a myriad burning points of rainbow light. Those who know Downland only in summer-time never really see it in all its subtle beauty and mystery. It is in winter, and then only on these rare days of utter calm following frosty nights, that one gets to know what space and altitude, limitless sunshine and blue sky, unbroken day-long solitude, mile upon mile of green hill and dale, every dew-soaked tussock a whirling kaleidoscope of shining gems, air like wine, and interminable strains of sweet, quiet music pervading earth and heaven, can together signify in the solace and refreshment of weary workaday men. But it is the music of the Downs in winter-time, the song of the larks and the quiet tolling of the sheep bells far and near, that chiefly ministers to the need of one escaped from the grey street crevices of a city. The skylark's song in winter has none of the exalted qualities of summer-time. You do not stand for long minutes together, straining sight and hearing up into the remote blue regions of space, hearkening and wondering how such a very cascade of song could come from so tiny a singer. Even on such days as this, the lark seldom ventures far from the green earth. His winter song is but a moment's melody. You see a sudden dark, flickering atom sidling up a few yards into the sunlight, and hear an instant's music flung with merry abandon into the crisp, keen air. But the next instant the lark drops like a stone, and the song is done. Yet in a moment another minstrel has taken up the strain. All the morning through, and hour by hour, if you will, you can time your step to its jolly roundelay. The sheep bells further a different human need. Theirs is not to quicken, but to heal. Small wonder that shepherds are, tribally, ruminative, placid folk, seeing that their lives are passed in such an environment of aerial music. Listen to the drowsy symphony now, as the flock drifts slowly across the coombe from hill to hill, half a mile from where you stand. Though the sheep look only like tufts of grey thistledown upon the green, every sound they make is clearly borne up to you through the serene, pure air. The quiet music lifts and falls, now in grand sweet chords, high or low, as the great iron weather bells or the little tinkling bronze castlings happen to chime together, and now in long wavering rills of soft notes, chasing each other up and down the scale. Southdown bell music is the very charm stuff against all civic fret and care. Strangers traversing the village street, if it be noon and the winter's day sunny and still, seldom get past the corner by the bee garden without stopping short to gaze about them wonderingly. There is a mysterious sound upon the air, a rich, insistent, throbbing music that might be the droning of one of the great pedal pipes of a cathedral organ heard afar. But where it comes from is hardly ever guessed. The old lichened wall, with its coping of gold-green moss, cuts off all view of the hives, with their winged legions out for their daily noontide cleansing flight. Generally, after a long but fruitless peering about for a solution of the mystery and a final questioning stare at the blue sky, the stranger passes on, lured up street, maybe, by the welcoming sign of the inn, yet as often assuredly by the siren chime of the smithy anvil, the only other sound that breaks the silence of a winter's day. Bee-masters have this great good thing conceded by Providence to their ancient calling. On almost any day in winter, if the sun shines bright and the hives are in a sheltered nook, they have only to loiter out into their bee gardens to bring back summer's most joyous music at a stroke. It is not for nothing that the honey bee, almost alone among winged insects, has been denied the boon of hibernation. She lies up quietly enough, sometimes for weeks on end, during the worst inclemencies of frost. The whole winter through, save in abnormally mild seasons, every hive is as still as a catacomb, except at this magic noontide hour on days of sunny calm. And then an astonishing thing suddenly comes to pass. One moment the drowsy golden silence of the bee garden seems as profound, as inviolable, as though the village lay full 5 fathom down at the bottom of a golden sea. And the next moment it is as if a reveille trump had sounded simultaneously in every bee dwelling to rouse the slumberers. Shining brown atoms of life begin to appear on each threshold, and crystal veins are everywhere unfurled. 1,000 harp strings begin to sound as one. In a few short minutes, every hive is the centre of a little, hovering, swirling cloud of misty light, made up of the scintillations from innumerable wings, and the song has grown to a very hurricane of music. if the limpid glory of the morning endure, the symphony holds on at its fullest, perhaps, for a quarter of an hour, and then it dies gradually down until the last of the airy roisterers has got back snug and warm to the cosy cluster within the hive. But if the sunlight be dimmed, even though only for an instant, the song is like to end almost as abruptly as it started. The old quietude comes back to the bee garden, treading hard upon the heels of its loudest, most joyous strain. The morning sunbeams, slanting across the lane, turn the hedgerow into one long heaving billow of silver light. Wild clematis, or old man's beard, so little regarded in summer-time, is easily the dominant note among wayside vegetation in November. The berries of thorn and briar and holly glow with rich colour, and the autumn leaves, fallen, falling, or still holding to their frail anchorage aloft, steep the countryside in a mirage of gold. But it is all only reflected, borrowed glory. The clematis alone seems to give out light of itself. With its pale green wreaths of foliage and inconspicuous blossom, you have passed this way 100 times, giving it scarce a glance. But now, in its full winter garb, it overrides everything. From end to end of the lane, all colour, even the brightest, goes down before its dazzling snow-pure lustre. The privet is another of the common lane-side plants which are seldom noticed in the throng and press of summer, yet which, in autumn, take to themselves predominant traits. In the privet berry, the quality that makes you stop to look at its prim, glittering clusters now is probably unique. One speaks of the sloe as a black fruit, but it is really blue. The blackberry, even at its ripest, is no more than a deep purple. But the privet berry is blackness, pure, unqualified, perhaps the blackest thing in living creation on this side of the world. The close-knit pyramids of berries make spots of unfathomable darkness set in the labyrinth of sunlit amber and russet and crimson, with all the telling effect of the old-time patch on a lady's face. But perhaps the most curious instance of this autumnal exaltation of summer's unconsidered things is to be found in the spindle tree. The spindle, with its attenuated structure, its light and diffident foliage, and flowers of meanly meagre stamp, passes absolutely unnoticed even in a crowd of the humblest woodland growths. Yet look at it now, lighting up the whole thicket as with rose-red flame. Each tiny floret of dingy white, scarce marked in the springtime, has changed into a pentiform casket covered with pink satin, and this, springing open like a star-trap, has pushed forth 5 great ovules of vivid orange and rich rose red, the whole tree standing out a mass of colour where a few months back its very existence was known only to a few wood-haunting moths and bees. There's the song thrush singing, perched on the outermost twig of the elm branch overreaching the lane, a coal-black spot on the grey November sky. He has been sitting there and singing in desultory fashion all the dim, quiet morning through, now and then flying off for a minute or two, but always returning sooner or later to the same lofty perch, and beginning again the same soft, deliberate melody. Song thrush music in November has little resemblance to the rippling, careless, joyful song of April days. The singer is only just getting back to his work after the long summer and autumn silence, and as yet he lacks artistic confidence and verve. A minute ago a missel thrush tuned up in the riverside alders, and his song, though brief, was in no wise different from that of any other time. Just the same hailing, undulating sound, 4 or 5 notes of indifferent quality following each other in the same vapid fashion and endlessly reiterated, whether the month be December or May. But the music of the song thrush, more perhaps than that of any other bird, is curiously affected by times and seasons. On these brooding, silent days in late autumn, when the face of winter is beginning to show grisly and dour through the fast thinning woods, the thrush gives over much of his characteristic love of repetition, a mere heterogeneous piling up of melodious sounds, and his song becomes a real, connected and ordered theme. Listen to him now as he sits motionless on his solitary perch under the gloom and quiet of the windless morning. From afar the song seemed to be a succession of isolated stanzas going off like minute guns in the muffled, dead-still air. But standing close under the elm branch where he perches, you soon find out that these intervals are seldom really mute. There is a little soft inward song with almost a blackbird quality of sedateness that thrushes in November love to alternate with their louder, more authentic strains. If the bird were not there plain to your eyes, and unmistakably a song thrush, you might humour the fancy that a blackbird was breaking the hitherto inviolable tradition of his race, and altruistically tuning his pipe to suit the need of lean times, and not, as he ever does, merely gilding the refined gold of summer's season. This quiet, deliberate melody of the song thrush, characteristic of the times, is well worth study, for it is incomparably the finest thing he does. You may never hear the beginning of the song, so softly is it uttered, but it grows and gathers in the still air with an indescribably winning insistence. Sweet, silver-bright stanzas following each other like the slowly paid-out beads of a rosary, each bead of rarer craftsmanship than the last. As the days shorten, the songs of the thrushes lengthen. From the single rare note, heard on some warm, showery daybreak at the beginning of the month, and then not again, perhaps, for days together, the song thrush's clear pipe soon becomes an integral part of the morning's melody. To one abroad on these mist-shrouded November dawns, when nothing of earth or sky can be seen but a shining white vacuity above and below, and nothing heard at first but the steady drip of moisture from the waterlogged trees, it is almost startling to hear the thrush set up her merry tune. She makes no preamble, but suddenly hurls a silver javelin of song across the lane, and follows it by another and another until the whole silent valley echoes to the music. A wren is sure to come next, with her simple, high-pitched, twittering refrain, and then the robins join in, one by one, quietly and, as it were, under their breath. Mavis and wren and robin first, and then, almost always, the shrill, uncanny cry of a little brown owl, either ending or beginning his foray, for he hunts by day as well as by night. The wailing staccato travels round meadow and wood, having, in the glittering miasma of the morning, a strange ventriloquial quality, so that one can never be sure of its distance or direction. Starlings begin to whistle and cluck and wheeze in the deep of the wood, and in the hedgerows, as you go along, innumerable tiny wings are astir amidst the incessant pattering cascade of water drops. In summer-time, the road through the wood is a white road, rippling away between verges of mossy green, overhung with flowers of every conceivable hue, flower-cumbered sunshine and flower-thronged shade, until, afar off, it narrows to a mere silver thread, where it tops the hill and comes to a sudden end against the blue. But now, as you stand looking through the tunnel of beechwood with the elm grove beyond, to the faraway brightness of the open lane, you mark how all its whiteness has vanished under a thick carpet of fallen leaves. Red in the beechwood, gold under the elms, and gold again on the open road, but of a sadder, quieter tinge, where the shrill, inconstant wind is stripping the fading maple leaves from the hedges and wafting them like yellow butterflies across the way. Once these early keen autumnal frosts have fastened their grip upon the greenery of wood and hedgerow, it is wonderful how swiftly the autumn colours come. Far and near, the country seems already to have broken out into a vast spreading conflagration. Zones of sheer flame where the great topping elms fill the valleys, and whole provinces of sullen, smouldering fire where the beechwoods climb the steeps. Loitering through the old lane, where the great beeches crowd about it most densely, you gaze up and see myriads of red leaves blotting out all vision of the sky, and millions more underfoot, every slow step drawing from them a soft, sibilant music that is the very voice of glad retrospect on summer's greenness, and gladder harking forward to summers yet to come. All about you the dim air is full of sidling, eddying, but ever descending discs of ruddy light, the red rain of the falling leaves. But whether falling, or fallen, or still holding valiantly aloft, for every red leaf there is a new-born bud up there, packed full of promise for next year's life, its swelling growth, indeed, the true cause of each autumn's leaf-fall. It is difficult to realise this fact, with an icy wind incessantly calling, change and decay on all around I see. The north wind is always for dirges and requiems, in or out of season. But once grasped, all taint of sadness is banished from autumn for ever. The scenery is being shifted upon the earth's stage, that is all. Summer's great act is ended. The autumnal hues are but a gorgeous drop scene, let down for a little space to dazzle and draw the eye, while the stage is cleared for the next act in nature's eternal pageant play. End of section 21. Section 22 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 12th month, December, Part 1. In the dripping apple bough outside the cottage window, a starling sat singing his queer song of dawn. Very black and wet he looked against the glimmering silver foil of the morning sky, just a bedraggled silhouette of a bird, but half awake from his winter roosting place in the ivy under the eaves. Lying in the grey darkness of the little room, I had heard him go scrambling and rustling out, heard the short quick whir of his wings as he flew the yard or so to the apple tree, and the sharp impact of his feet on the cascading bough. He was silent a while, and then the curious, pondering recitative began. Its first note brought home to me the welcome truth. The long, pitiless frost had broken at last. A moment later I was thrusting head and shoulders through the little window, drawing in deep draughts of the precious, soul-warming western air. Prolonged, inveterate frosty weather silences nearly all the birds supposed to sing the winter through. I had not heard a thrush for a fortnight, and only an occasional half-hearted trill from wren or robin, if the frost-bitten sun contrived a gleam or two at high noon. But to hear the starling's rare song, and that at first grey light of dawn, could betoken only one event. With something of the bird's own gratefulness and joy at the return of warm, life-favouring weather stirring within me, I knelt at the little casement, drinking in balm of air and balm of living music to my heart's content. To speak of the starling as a singing bird may well excite the wonder of those who know him in springtime only as the clucking, whistling proletarian of the rooftops, or in winter sweeping across the countryside in incredible hordes with wild, discordant cry. But there are starlings and starlings, and many a sweet song some of them give at times. The one in the sodden apple thicket under my window began his lay this morning with a low, lingering, inward note, strangely reminiscent of the nightingale's familiar keening phrase, the slow tolling of a single deep, quiet bell that always goes before the sudden, objurgatory part of the famous symphony. Then he set to work on a piece inimitably his own, a jumble of rather reedy tenor notes, picked seemingly at random up and down the scale. It was truly a song, nevertheless, and the secret of its fascination lay in its epic power of voicing the common joy of all living, moving things at the break in the long frost. The happy birds calling to each other now across the lanes and fields in ever-increasing medley. The song of running water once more, and again the call of the ploughmen to their jingling teams. And all through the long, dark, drenching morning a thrush has sung near my open window, the pure sweet notes beating time for the runnel music of the pouring eaves. A country lover, housebound by such a Noah's flood of steadily cascading water, and oppressed, even a little appalled, by the unending gloom, cannot quite make out at first what the thrush has got to be so merry about. Why he sits in the dripping hedgerow carolling out his song hour after hour, as though it were a morning in May. The rain drives straight down through the windless, torpid air. You cannot see beyond the end of the village street. Wood and field and distant hills, all alike whelmed in a formless mist of water. The very tree-tops near at hand are lost in the grey, overlooming pall. And yet the thrush pipes on gaily, even rapturously, his clear, crystal-bright song annihilating the gloom and sadness of the morning, as though he were put there designedly to shame your pessimistic mood and turn your leaden, lagging pen-point into gold as it drives across the page. And that, assuredly, is as it should be. We get but half the good from a country life, from a deliberate attempt to restore correspondence between human life and that which is called nature, if we do not realise how all natural things, including elemental humankind, work together for mutual aid and furtherance. The man who treads on a daisy without a pang at heart, he who can tramp the purple moorlands all day long and see nothing but a little white ball and a distant flag, who can run his boat into a green reed bower by the riverside, and, lying in leaf-winnowed summer sunlight, dream only of stocks and shares, or he who, listening to a nightingale in the sweet June darkness, does not get a new notion from the sound, or learn something from the scent of wild roses or the lazy crackle of bursting gorse-pods on sweltering summer days, that man is, of all others, to be pitied. Wilfully or ignorantly, he has disregarded things that, it is hard to believe, were but set in his path fortuitously. The story of Pippa's random song and this thrush's careless piping in the gloom and downpour, surely in their outcome betray to us the inmost meaning of what we so strangely miscall happy chance. Wild bird song and the clear runnel music from the pouring eaves all day through until the dark. And now, with the fall of night, both have ceased together, and another voice begins to creep into the drenched solemn stillness out of doors. There seems always something eerie, inopportune, about the wind that slumbers by day, but wakes and flies abroad, like an owl, at night. Normal effort and alertness appear to belong by right to daylight's hours. But nature ever defies our anthropomorphic imputation of proprieties, and now the wind is getting up with a will. Only a faint crepitation at first in the highest tree-tops. Within an hour the sound of it has grown into a steady organ peal, a rich, reverberating harmony that draws you out into the darkness of the garden to listen, as listlessly as though you were a ship with all sails spread before the blast. Wind in winter trees has none of the sibilant otiose quality of summer-time. The bare tree-tops are like so many strung harps, each twig adding its own clear note to the symphony. This is just a great strong voice hallooing in the night, an alarm to be out and doing. Winter winds have always this urging call to action in their sound, infinitely disquieting to certain natures, especially after dark. But perhaps of all songs of the open air, that of the sea lays a more intimate stress than any upon human hearts. Never ceasing, ever changing, the sound of the sea, to those who dwell by it, becomes a real, though often unrealised, factor in every mood of life. Everything in nature has a dominant but never a single purpose. Sunshine has a myriad uses beyond its principal one of light-giving. Seeds nourish the birds as well as propagate their kind. The loveliness of a wildflower generates loveliness in the mind of the human observer, though its main purpose is to draw to it the fertilizing bee. And so, when sun and moon and wind unite to stir the ocean into cloud-making, and thence to its chief end of irrigating the earth, there is added to us this great good thing, a constant yet beautifully inconsistent music, which, whether he will or no, whether he receive it consciously or unconsciously, impels every man to life-giving, creative thought. Little Paul Dombey, sitting in his invalid chair by the seashore, and trying to make out what it is the wild waves are always saying, is a type of the many who realise that there is some further, finer meaning in this eternal ocean melody that peals along our coasts. True musical art makes the hearer forget the music in the reverie it awakens, and this is the quality which is ever present in the song of the sea, giving it its main significance and worth. In calm or storm there is something in it that answers to every human mood, and perhaps it is its innate joyness, its invisible optimism, that holds the secret of its fascinating power. The Downs, on these sunless, windless winter days, have a charm known to few, because few ever go to them at this season. Seen from the wooded, cultivated lowlands, they look so mournful and so desolate, just a grey, misty, sagging line of hills, far aloft and scarce discernible against the kindred grey of the December sky. On the rich alluvial plain below, one thinks, there are at least hedgerows full of bright-hued berries and silver sheen of clematis, woods already purple and russet with promise of a new year's life, song thrushes and missels and redbreasts carolling all day long. But what can there be on those bare deserted heights other than negation of life, stark silence, cheerless solitude? Well, choose the greyest, stillest, gloomiest morning, and set off up the old chalk lane that leads to the Downs. The first thing you realise, after gaining the hilltop and journeying a while over the wide tableland beyond, is that the air has lost its torpidity. There is nothing that can be called wind, yet you move in an atmosphere that is broad awake, full of an indescribable zest and savour, instinct with the very spirit of free, joyous life. And then this greyness and silence and dour, forsaken look which the Downs bore, viewed from below? Let eyes and ears record the honest truth of what lies now about your path. There is no thrush and robin music, which would be as unmeet here as in mid-ocean, for, in its way, downland is as alien to a conventional countryside as it is to the deep sea. But the Downs have a melody all their own, year-long indeed, except in the brief season of lambing time when the ewes are down in the farm steadings. All round you, as you stand in the wide green solitude, the sheep bells are giving forth their sweet, tranquil note. Though there are peewits winding their shrill horns in every coombe, and jays and magpies and furze chats in every gorse patch by the way, you neither want nor heed their busy symphony. The sheep bells are enough. Distance blends the whole volume of sound from each flock into a single, low, soft clamour, lifting and falling, stopping and going on again by turns. But, drawing nearer, you soon realise what ceaseless variety in pitch and tone these old Sussex sheep bells can encompass, and how truly they interpret the spirit of the scene in which their music is made. Almost it seems as if the bellwethers worked in concert designedly. There comes a deep tolling note, measured and slow, from a single bell far up on the hillside. Then a tender chord from several smaller bells together, the sound echoed from group to group of the slowly browsing sheep, as if the bells themselves were travelling the still air and chiming as they went. Finally comes a long wavering rill of sound that grows into a veritable storm of music as the whole flock, moved by some common impulse, sweeps down the coombe together. A moment later, all are still again, and the single, deep-throated bell has the morning to itself once more. Away from the downs in the white wilderness of the wood, the light is so dim that one can scarce make out the path a dozen yards ahead. A single night of frost and fog, and all the new-found light-riddled bareness of the winter wood is gone once more. The hoarfrost has gathered incredibly thick upon every twig and branchlet overhead, and upon every bramble and privet spray and stem of grass beneath. The very leaves of autumn covering the path are changed to discs of pure white velvet. The sheathing frost has doubled and trebled the girth of everything living or dead, stopping the light on every hand and blocking out all vision of the sky, so that, just for this one white, silent, shrouded hour, the wood has got back in all its depth and fullness a ghostly semblance of its summer gloom. Snow clogs and malforms, imposing a ruthless dead weight of white upon everything. But the hoarfrost only beautifies whatever it overlays, and its magic touch brings to all alike the illusion of a delicate, lovely inflorescence. They are true flower forms, these spreading stars and Maltese crosses and multiple rosettes, into which the frost has transmuted every twig and leaf and grass blade and sprig of herbage in the old wood. But the seeming utter whiteness of it all has no existence in truth. It is but the phantasm of an eye unversed in the discrimination of minutely associated points of colour. Looking closely, you will soon find out that, in itself, hoarfrost has no whiteness other than the whiteness of scintillating diamond dust, a myriad infinitesimal sparks of colour, each intensely brilliant atom lost in the glory of its fellows. Crimson annihilating emerald, the turquoise obliterating the violet and gold. A still more curious trait in the nature of these hoarfrost effects is the method by which their bewildering beauty and variformity are brought about. Nothing is merely enlarged by the dense secretion of the frost. All is recreated into something new and strange. There is no simple envelopment. The hoarfrost takes twig or leaf or grass blade merely as foundation, starting point, from which is evolved a fairy structure wholly alien, it may be, to the thing that gave it initial being. The secret of this original creative power of the hoarfrost lies in the fact that it grows by incessantly adding to itself tiny microcosmic cubes and prisms of ice. The wonderful frost flowers are built up in this way exactly as a house is built up of brick or stone. From the steep riverside bank, nothing of the water can be seen for the dense intercepting jungle of reeds. Pale dun-brown in colour and all of a height, the reeds stretch away under the still December sunshine in one unbroken receding level that brings up at last against the oak wood on the farther side of the river, as a sea is stopped by beetling cliffs. It is one of those rare times when the garrulous reeds may be said to be silent for once, as well as still. In the green summer-time, though not the faintest breath of air is moving under heaven, there is never absolute silence in the reed thicket. It is as if the mere fact of all that congregated verdant growth and rich sappy life made a sound of its own, just discernible to human ear. But in the slumber time of winter, still days are really silent days in these mimic forests of reeds. Standing on the high bank and looking out over the wide sunlit expanse, I could detect not the slightest sound, strain the ear as I would, nor mark the merest deflection in any of the myriad close-knit stems. The utter silence and the stillness, dwelling on minute after minute, at length took to themselves an oppressive, almost an uncanny cast. But these times of perfect, unleavened stillness out of doors seldom endure for long. If the season be winter, and the hour verging on towards noon of a sunny day, they may last only a minute or two, and then end as suddenly as they began. It is not often that one hears the wind stop dead, fall like a shot bird, as I heard it a short 10 minutes ago. Still more rarely does it come within one's experience to hear it reawaken as suddenly, sound and motion spring up together, rise in a moment, visible and vocal, like a lark leaving the clod and lifting her sudden music to the skies. Yet so it happened to-day, as I stopped to look over the vast dun plain of riverside reeds, wondering at their silence and stark immobility under the yellow winter sun. I saw and heard the wind returning long before its first rough breath struck upon the cheek. Far away over the soft, filmy level, a voice was suddenly upraised in the silence, and a deep cleft as suddenly came in the brown. The hurrying, hustling channels of shadow, lighter and darker by turns, began to chase each other impetuously forward. Little eager whirlpools appeared between the furrows and spun round together in a giddy dance, and great sombre chasms opened in their path, ruthlessly engulfing them. The brown reed ocean began to fall into seething sierras of wave crests, with deep, surging hollows between. And all came driving relentlessly onward, until at last the reed rampart close by broke under the onslaught, and came shattering down about my ears. End of section 22. Section 23 of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The 12th month, December, Part 2. In the village garden, under the bright noon sunshine, singing thrushes and singing bees make the day more like a day in early summer than one at the very nadir of the year. Those who think of beehives as dead, silent things throughout the long English winter are always astounded at the busy life abroad at every break in the frosty weather. For there is no true hibernation in hive life. The bees merely get together between the combs in a solid phalanx, with their precious queen in their midst, and there they slumber contentedly through the long frost-bound days and nights, rousing ever so little now and then to take what food is necessary to sustain life. So long as the cold endures, the bee garden is silent enough, save for the merry thrush music in the leafless boughs. But with the first breath of southern air, that so often comes up like new life in the darkness of the winter's night when a change is brewing, a mysterious sound can be heard along the row of hives. Wandering out into the garden then, under the flinching silver of the stars, the night air strikes almost hot upon your cheek, and you bring up stock still at the wonderful new sound that is thrilling in the darkness, as though a great harp-string had been touched ever so gently by an invisible hand. All bee-masters know the sound, and the cause of it. Every bee in the garden, and there may be 10,000 or more to a hive, is suddenly awake and stirring and telling all her bedfellows that the cold is gone, and the long-awaited turn of the days is here at last. And now, under the warm, still light of cloudless noon, the whole garden is full of scintillating wings, and the morning overladen with a soft, drowsy melody. There is, indeed, no busy, purposeful coming and going as in summer days, no ceaseless streams of bees pouring from the hives and away under the blue sky towards the blossoming clover fields, and no opposing streams of home-wending bees, so heavily burdened with nectar and golden pollen that they can scarce drag themselves into the hives. The activity to-day is merely for exercise, recreation, bodily easement. If you watch a single bee just emerging from her dwelling, you will see that she does not lance straight off into the skies, as she would do if the honey harvest of summer were at its full gathering. She just lifts herself sedately into the air, and, turning, hovers a while with her head to the hive, as though taking careful stock of it. And then she will sail off into the aerial throng, making half a dozen deliberate circles and spirals, then a wide, desultory sweep or two round the garden, finally returning to the hive and running in at once, as if glad to get back to its cosy warmth and gloom. Then there are the winter moths. To carry a lantern into the woods on any of these mild and muggy winter nights is to get a glimpse into a phase of wildlife that the most diligent quest has never yet robbed of all its mystery. Richness of colour and grace of form in insect, bird or flower are wonderful enough in summer's broad day. Yet their existence is at least understandable, if only on the old rash conjecture as being for human ennoblement or delight. But why should the blind winter dark be sown thick with living gems of beauty? winged wandering jewels that pass and repass through the yellow lantern glow, shining hovering specks of colour, fiery amber or dusky gold, or pale moony silver grey, more lustrous than all. Such a thought must occur to the least imaginative on coming by lamplight into a wood on any of these tepid, muffled winter nights, and observing the many moths abroad. Without the lantern, the darkness would be complete. The link-bearer is engulfed, encased in it as a worm that has eaten its way into the heart of a bale of black velvet. And as is the darkness, so the silence. Though afar off, the wailing note of an owl vexes the secret deep of the wood, and rarely a breath of night wind draws across the highest tree-tops, the whole wide valley of a forested land seems entirely mute. Coming to a halt at length, the rhythmic surge of my feet through the fallen leaves dies down, and there gathers about me in a moment a silence that is almost fearsome in its profundity. I can hear my own heart beating, and the tick of my watch in its fob. And then, long before the little careering atom of smouldering bronze draws into the magic circle of the light, a dull, thrumming note grows on the air. It is a December moth, a female, plainly, by her size and breadth of wing, swinging gaily through the golden patch in the Cimmerian darkness. Back and through again, ever with the same jaunty, errandless gait. And presently others with her, until the whole circle of light is alive with tiny veering flecks of topaz and amber and sheeny moonstone, and the air throbs with a sound as of elfin music, for all it is but just within the stretch of the intensest ear. There are other winter moths that may soon be chanced upon in the deep woods and tree-girt lanes, and these stranger still in their habit of life, though, so far as my knowledge takes me, it is only the gloaming winged December, and perhaps only the female at that, which gives out this ineffably soft murmur as it goes. Such moths as the dun-red herald, and that known as the early, may be already on the wing in certain favoured districts, lured from the chrysalid stage out of due season by the strangely clement times. But the lantern will draw only the fluttering, blundering males, for the astonishing reason that it is the males alone which fly. The females of all this mysterious family are equipped with only the merest travesty for wings, entirely useless in flight, and pass their lives hiding among the twigs of the hedgerows or in crevices of the bark of trees. Now and again, as I pass along, the light of the lantern just catches on the holly berries. It is certain now that there will be no lack in English homes, or need be none, at least, of bright-berried holly for the garland making at Christmas, and it is equally certain that many people, whose only acquaintance with holly is an indoor one at this season, will be noticing how much of its green glossy foliage is without the usual spines. The holly's overflowing horn of plenty this December is due indirectly to the long-continued mildness of the times. When winter sets in very early, and with unusual severity, the stores of rose and mayberries on the countryside are prematurely exhausted, and the birds must come to the attractive yet ill-flavoured holly, or starve. But in seasons of mild, open weather, such as has been experienced lately, especially in good blossom years like the present, the plenitude of hips and haws, supplemented by the fact that mild winters delay the crowding of the normally insectivorous birds to the hedgerows for food, has almost wholly kept the hollyberries from depredation. Sometimes, however, it happens that the holly will bear its scarlet load of fruit untouched till well into December, and then, the hard frost suddenly setting in, Christmas finds the hollyberries all but gone, the garland makers bereft of their chief supplies. The absence of prickly leaves, which will probably be observed on some of the most richly and profusely berried holly boughs gathered for decoration this year, is explained by the circumstance that the older trees have borne exceptionally well this season on their upper branches, so well, in fact, that it has been worth while to climb for their treasure of densely clustered fruit. If the holly is not a tree that thinks, it is not easy to understand its plan of life in regard to this question of spined and unspined foliage. The whole plant, bark and leaf and tender twig, is good to eat, as most four-footed creatures know. The young holly saplings have a perilous time of it in natural, unprotected situations, not a tithe of them ever reaching maturity. But where one has chanced to attain such girth and height as to defy the bark-nibbling rabbits, it is only to find itself beset with new dangers. Browsing animals would soon strip it of its fleshy, succulent leaves if it did not put on this formidable armament of prickles. Yet, and here is where the holly tree seems to make a reasonable proposition of life as opposed to an instinctive one, it grows these prickly defences only to the height normally reached by its larger, hungry foes. Above that line, the leaves swiftly lose their sharp, strong barbs, and the upper regions of growth bear only smooth, unspined foliage, though there the brilliant-hued berries make a braver show than ever. White fog and a white seashore, and the sullen waters whispering afar off invisibly on the brink of the low-tide sands. To realise the utter solitude of the place, one must be here alone on the shrouded winter's morning, alone amidst the white silence above and below. Lifeless, colourless, formless, mute, but for the one soft crisping murmur stealing over to you through the void. Walking just where the steep shingle bank and the rippled sandy levels meet, your footsteps make not the slightest sound in the snow. No single cry of bird nor audible token of other life reaches the ear. The dim air is as still as the age-long imprisoned air of a crypt. You seem to be alone on the whole wide earth. And then the rapt intensity of silence breaks with such a sudden crash and commotion as sends your heart leaping into your cap with the utter surprise of it all. Yet by reason of such a simple, ordinary thing, no more than a hare hiding among the low-tide rocks. What he was doing there on such a morning passes all conjecture. But now, startled at your approach, he is up and off with the speed of light along the precipitous shore, scattering pebbles and snow together uproariously as he goes. To the eye, through the dense white mist, he is lost almost in a moment. but the clatter of his sudden flight can be followed, ever diminishing, until, perhaps half a mile away, the straining ear loses it finally. The silence shuts down again over the scene as solidly as ever. White fog looming over a white seashore, and the sullen waters lisping afar off, unseen on the brink of the low-tide sands. But these portentous phases of the season, albeit seemingly so lasting and profound, are scarce ever more than the passing mood of an hour. Even as you stand wondering and a little awed at the blind hush on everything about you, a change comes in the lilt of distant water-song. The tide has turned, and the first in-driving ripples are beginning to add their eager bell music to the old, quiet, lisping, listless strain. And now you can just discern a lightening of the fog around you, a gradual thinning and cleaving far and near, above and below. In a little while, the irregular line of shingled shore to east and west becomes dimly perceptible. A few more minutes, and, looking seaward, you can make out the new foam of oncoming waters, each white curve driving in a little nearer than its fellow before. Out now over the sloppy, glittering, weed-tressed sands to the very brink of the waters, but just in time to note their intense deep green under the new-found light, before the wreaths of white vapour overhead rend and sweep asunder. Suddenly before you a resplendent golden pathway of sunbeams is laid upon the green, stretching right from your very feet to the remote horizon line, the dim blue trysting place of sky and sea. It is not the green earth alone which has her seasons. Spring and summer, autumn and winter are as indubitably written month by month in the skies. The variances of light and cloud effect in winter, contrary to the general belief, tend in the main not towards turbulence and gloom, but rather towards harmony and serenity of hue and form, as all know well who study the skies year in and year out. Calm days at this season, and they are many, seldom pass into other than nights of star-gemmed or moonlit calm, pure tranquillity done in silver point on azure. And the few really boisterous winter days, days of resounding wind and black storm cloud driving helter-skelter over the world, commonly end in a sundown that is just formless, tinctured radiance and nothing more. Not a breath of air moving now, nor a trace of cloud showing between darkling earth and darkling sky. But the day's end most thoroughly characteristic of this spirit of serenity and concord marking the English winter is the kind which so often brings what is called threatening weather to a close. The morning light comes late, and in a seemingly tentative, diffident way. All day through, great vague masses of cloud stand about in the sky, shifting their station scarce a jot from hour to hour, one would say, but for the ever waxing and waning sunshine about one's path, the incessant dimming and brightening of the distant hills. But at the sunset hour, all the dubiety of the elements vanishes, suddenly knit, as it were, into one set purpose of wonder-weaving. The clouds in the east endlessly divide themselves into ribbons and ripples and trailing garlands and festoons, all sharply, delicately carved out of alabaster, and laid upon a field of pellucid air intensely blue above, but shading down towards the earth line into soft, pure green. And every fleck of cloud from horizon to zenith is steeped through and through, not with mere colour of fine gold, but with an intolerable glory of golden flame. And each resplendent plume or cresting wavelet of fire has all its edges clear cut against the living amethyst or emerald of farthermost space. There is not a trace of sullying, incongruous shadow, or of cooler colour in the whole magnificent array of the sky, nor of one hue merging into another. Just a bewilderingly beautiful crazy pattern of molten amber upon burning blue, all alike in its sheer intensity, with the coal-black Sierra of wooded earthline losing itself beneath in a sombre scumbling of rose. The end of 12 glad months. End of section 23. End of A Country Calendar by Tickner Edwardes.